This guy was betrayed in the worst way possible. The girl destroyed him completely, and now she needs to pay. In this game, newbies are treated like trash and don't get any help. The protagonist was humiliated for being weak and couldn't find a party, but this girl was different. She said she was partyless and that he seemed perfect. When they left the city, the girl said he looked like a real knight in that gear. It took a single phrase to make the guy start imagining their future together. First kiss, marriage proposal, family, and then kids. But when they arrived at a secluded spot outside the city, the girl really touched his heart, literally, with her magic staff. As he fell, the player asked why she'd go so far just to steal his items. But the girl explained she didn't need trash loot like his, even calling him poor and saying he must be a beggar's kid to have such weak gear. When she finished destroying his pride and his heart, she PK'd him and said she was sick of losers. After eliminating the 1000th newbie player, the girl unlocked a secret class in the game. Now she is the first goddess of the game Chrono Life. Happy with her new class, she left while saying she had a mission to complete. The eliminated player faces a huge penalty. He respawns in the nearest city and loses half his experience and power. While remembering being treated as weak by everyone, the protagonist Jiwoo decides to risk everything and try to upgrade his weak starter items. He tries on his sword and fails miserably. Furious, he tries on his glove to compensate. He tries and fails horribly. After various hammer strikes, Jiwoo destroyed all his items and couldn't upgrade a single one. His life in the game was over and he could only cry, but then a twig fell near him. This is a free starter item for beginners, considered trash and common for other players to throw away. His intrusive thoughts took over as he looked at it. He tried once and it worked. The item was upgraded once, plus 1 extra damage. He tried again and it worked. Irritated by the irony, Jiwoo decided to upgrade this piece of junk until it broke. His arm was out of strength when he landed the final hammer strike. The damn stick was upgraded to the max level of +199. Unable to believe it, Jiwoo got nervous and accidentally dropped the stick. When the item touched the ground, the game counted it as an attack, so the biggest explosion seen by humanity happened. An attack so devastating it almost split the planet in two. While staring at the destruction, various notifications popped up frantically in front of him. The player broke the record for players eliminated in a single attack. 850,617 players died. After accepting that he had the most broken power in the game, Jiwoo decided he was going to use this to get revenge on those who looked down on him, especially the goddess girl. Jiwoo is poor. He doesn't even have money to buy new clothes. While walking, another player bumped into him, got furious, and threatened him. Jiwoo said, "You asked for it." Then he landed an attack with his stick. The player exploded and a part of the city was wiped off the map. People nearby realized he was the one causing this. Jiwoo was confident, but a system alert caught him by surprise. His item now has a durability of 3 out of 5. Only 3 attacks left until the item breaks. He hid in an alley to think. He has the strongest item in the world but can only use it 3 more times. Using this to PK people for revenge is a waste. This time he used his brain and decided to use it to become famous by defeating the strongest boss in the game. Upon arriving at the Valley of Death, Jiwoo hears a threatening roar. It's the strongest boss in Chrono Life, Urus, the 2-headed dragon. Urus tries to scare Jiwoo with his strength, but before he can finish speaking, he takes a hit that rips off one of his heads, leaving him in shock. Now the game has changed, and Urus wants to talk it out, but Jiwoo isn't interested in chatting. Since he only had 3 attacks left, he decided to defeat the most powerful boss quickly to power level to the max. So, he lands one more attack that leaves the dragon wrecked. Jiwoo laments that his powerful weapon is about to disappear, but at that moment, Urus sees a chance to survive, and says he has a proposal for him. Jiwoo, already out of patience, tells him to speak fast. Urus then explains about ego-class weapons. When a strong soul fuses with a weapon, it becomes the strongest in the game and has infinite durability. However, there is a catch. For Jiwoo to access that power, he needs to make a pact with the dragon. This way, Urus will be able to live as a soul inside the stick. Jiwoo doesn't think twice and accepts. Urus then fuses his soul to the stick. Now the item became even more powerful, gaining the ego class and infinite durability. Finally, Jiwoo can continue his revenge. After all, now he can use his power to the max without worrying. Meanwhile, back in the city, things are heating up. Wanted posters of Jiwoo have been spread across all kingdoms, dead or alive, with a handsome reward of 1 billion gold. And to top it off, the cavalry has arrived. Various adventurer guilds from all over the kingdom came to solve this problem. The 5 strongest guilds of Chrono Life gather with their leaders, who are all very powerful, with a single mission: hunt down the one who eliminated more than 850,000 players at once. After all, he is a threat to everyone and must be stopped. For the leadership of this new alliance, the most respected warrior of all was chosen. Revolution. The Castle King, Arden, leader of the Justice Guild. Under his hawk eyes, the World Union Guild is formed, and war is declared on Jiwoo. However, now the stick has infinite power, and Jiwoo can use it to the max. Lo and behold, while walking through the capital all happy, Jiwoo suddenly gets a scare. A type of creature comes out of the stick, but soon it speaks, revealing it's Urus, the two-headed dragon from the Pact. Jiwoo thinks he became very cute. It's a pity only he can see him now. But hold on, not everything is sunshine and rainbows, and soon all this joy is going to end. Jiwoo picks it up and questions what it is. It was his wanted poster. The sight completely stuns him, and he notices that there are tens of thousands of posters just like it plastered all over the city, on every wall. Urus, on the other hand, shouts with joy. He says this was to be expected from his Hyungnim, who took down 800 people with a single blow, a feat he himself couldn't even come close to. Besides, the 1 billion gold bounty meant 1 billion in real cash, which was very fancy. Jiwoo questions how an AI like him can use slang like fancy, as that should be a violation of the rules. Urus replies that nobody cares, since he's already kicked the bucket. He then asks what his Hyungnim will do now, because with a bounty like this, users from all over the world will be coming for his head, suggesting that maybe they should just eradicate the humans once and for all. Jiwoo looks to the side, remembering when he dropped the stick on the ground, and then stares at the scattered posters. He thinks that in any case, the feeling isn't bad at all. He feels like he's become a celebrity. He announces that since things have come to this, he'll have to adopt the LHS style. Urus, confused, asks what that means. The protagonist explains that it's an acronym for loser hiding strength, an archetype where a powerful person pretends to be a loser. Urus questions why he would do that, arguing that humans would just ignore him, thinking he's a weakling. But Jiwoo says he just doesn't get it, and that this will be fun. He asks if Urus has never seen something like this before. In the eyes of others, he looks like a weakling, but he's actually the protagonist. He needs to enjoy his fantasy life to the fullest, until, suddenly, he's hit by an arrow. Urus is shocked. Jiwoo falls, spitting blood on the ground. He lays his head down while Urus flies over him, worriedly calling for his Hyungnim. On a rooftop, Hawkeye was watching, holding a rare, cyan-colored bow with a quiver full of arrows of the same hue. He calls out that he's hit the target. Below, his army runs toward Jiwoo, who remains on the ground as the troops of Arden Castle surround him. Hawkeye shouts, "In the name of the Supreme Commander of the 5 Guilds Union, I order you to bind this abominable man who murdered 800,000 people and throw him in jail." All the soldiers roar in response, ready to follow his orders. Urus, desperate, asks if his Hyungnim is okay, urging him to get up. "These humans may be weak, but you'll be in trouble if they all come at once." Despite the arrow stuck in his chest, Jiwoo gets up, facing the Arden army. The soldiers shout that the enemy is on his feet. Hawkeye orders, "Don't give him time to breathe! Attack all at once!" Urus calls out for his Hyungnim once more, apprehensive. Jiwoo, however, takes back his previous words. He rips the arrow from his chest and hurls it to the ground in contempt. Gripping his staff tightly, he says that he just wanted to live peacefully as a background extra. But these idiots brought this upon themselves. An immense explosion of energy erupts, illuminating the entire realm. As he swings his staff, he unleashes a power akin to a nuclear bomb, and in an instant, all the soldiers drop lifeless to the ground. Hawkeye coughs, having barely survived. He wonders what happened. In just an instant, his entire army was decimated. Shocked, he realizes that the capital of the First Realm had simply vanished. Suddenly, Jiwoo appears right in front of him. Hawkeye stares at him, terrified. As the protagonist draws closer, the elf pulls a summoning orb from his clothes, capable of summoning as many users as he desires. Hawkeye shatters the orb, and a magic circle appears beneath his feet as dozens of other portals open up all around. The elf shouts, "Answer my call, all members of the Union. Activate large-scale teleportation." Tens of thousands of people begin to emerge from each portal, and Jiwoo simply watches the scene, showing no reaction. The newly arrived soldiers surround him, revealing an army of millions from the World Union. There were approximately 3 million people, all summoned for a single purpose, to deal with Jiwoo. Hawkeye points at him and screams to his army, "Attack!" At his command, the warriors advance in unison. Seeing the tide of enemies, Jiwoo simply lets out a deep sigh. He then moves his staff to the side, and with a single motion, effortlessly cuts down an entire row of soldiers. Everyone in the path of the attack is completely annihilated. Urus watches, stunned. Jiwoo swings the staff to the other side and then thrusts it forward, decimating another large portion of the army. The dragon, Urus, is in utter shock. He remembers thinking that Jiwoo would be in trouble if they all attacked at once. To him, it was just common sense. After all, no matter how strong Eurus himself was, even he couldn't handle millions of people at once. The World Union was no easy opponent. They were elite rankers from all over the world, and perhaps even Eurus would lose if he brought his entire army into the fray. That's why he had concluded that the best course of action was to retreat. But now, he realized he had been completely and utterly wrong. Seizing the opening, a few soldiers from the crew's lineage charge forward, wielding their swords and spears. They leap toward Jiwoo, attempting to pierce him, but the protagonist merely moves his staff, annihilating them all with a single touch. Another entire row of the army is split in two. In the background, Abracadabra, with the help of her assistant mages, quickly prepares a spell. Jiwoo senses the movement behind him and turns to see an immense magic circle forming in the sky. Abracadabra casts the ancient enchantment of destruction, a spell powerful enough to disintegrate him. A colossal beam of energy hurtles toward him, and the protagonist watches with a surprised expression. He remarks to himself that the spell's name was pretty cool and decides he needs to come up with a name for his own technique as well. Then, he swings his staff upward. The strike cuts through everything in its path, extending far above the atmosphere. Arise, he names it. The magic circle and the ancient spell are simply obliterated. Stunned, Abracadabra can only ask how he was able to shatter her ancient magic. The royal sorcerers prepare for the next command, but before they can act, Jiwoo moves his stick upward again. Calling this strike, attack. He cuts through everything in front of him, sending the mages flying. The result of 1 against 3 million wasn't just overwhelming, it was disastrous. The World Union Guild was completely defeated. Hawkeye is kneeling on the ground, breaking out in a cold sweat from fear. He repeats to himself that he can't believe it, until Jiwoo appears before him. The protagonist says he didn't take his life on purpose, because thanks to him, it was difficult to control his strength. The elf questions why he didn't kill him. Jiwoo sighs, saying it's obvious. Earlier, he was the one who shot the arrow. Hawkeye panics, but his face is struck by the stick. As expected, the battle that day became a popular topic. Not just among Chrono Life users, but also among players of other games and even people with no interest in gaming. Despite everything, the stick remained intact. Jiwoo analyzes it as he finishes off the elf. Uru says that Hyungnim is truly incredible, and the protagonist comments that he was wondering where he had gone. Suddenly, someone approaches from behind. The protagonist turns around, coming face to face with a girl. He wonders if there's still someone else left, thinking what a pain this is, until he recognizes her figure as familiar. The two of them stare at each other in the middle of the battlefield. However, the goddess of life just looks at him. Jiwoo feels anger welling up as he realizes who she is. No one had expected this reunion. The goddess of life smiles and says, "It's been a long time, Mr. Heyo." A vast expanse of the plains at sunset is revealed, covered with 3 million bodies and countless swords and spears scattered across the ground. And in the midst of it all, Jiwoo's reunion with the goddess of life. He thought the whole scene was quite dramatic. He remembers when she called his parents beggars, and his hand trembles with rage. He isn't sure if it's because it's the opposite of what he was feeling before, but he can't help but laugh. The goddess of life asks how he has been. She comments that it must be fate, as she didn't expect to meet him once again. Jiwoo replies that it's nonsense, and that just by looking at her, he can tell someone terrible was looking for him. The goddess smiles, wanting to know if that's the impression she gives. Jiwoo says that although he just wants to crush her, there's still something he wants to talk about, and asks if she dyed her hair. The goddess is happy he noticed, explaining that she took his life to change her class to the secret goddess of life, and that's why her hair color changed. Jiwoo stares at her coldly and sighs. Raising his staff, he says her job changed to goddess of life after she took 1,000 lives, and that it should actually be goddess of death. The goddess agrees, finding the observation amusing. "Absolutely," Jiwoo replies. Then, he slams his staff on the ground and launches a blast of energy in her direction, shouting that he's heard the funny story, and now it's time for the part where he crushes her. The goddess questions if that wasn't a bit too fast, but the explosion goes off, devastating the area even more. Jiwoo looks at the smoke, expressionless. "What a shame," her voice says. "I would have liked to talk a little longer." She suddenly appears behind him. Jiwoo spins around quickly and slams his staff on the ground once more, and the explosion cracks everything in front of him. Urus yells that the target was hit. As expected of Hyungnim, a perfect strike, like slicing a catfish. Jiwoo replies that it was obvious, since those gentle-looking bastards are usually all talk. However, as the smoke begins to dissipate, he realizes she is still standing. The goddess remains still, watching him in silence. As expected, "You've grown considerably stronger," she says, "but you can't take my life with such a feeble attack." Urus yells for Hyungnim to look, pointing out that she's still alive, to which Jiwoo replies that he can see. While the two argue, the goddess simply watches them with a smile. Urus notices her gaze and grows confused, wondering how that's possible since she's looking right at him. "That's impossible! How can anyone besides Hyungnim see me?" he exclaims. Jiwoo agrees that it is indeed strange. He's certain his attack was a success, so it makes no sense for her to be completely unscathed. The goddess scoffs, questioning if a mere human could ever harm a goddess. Jiwoo feigns surprise and brings his staff to his head, saying that now he's really angry. Then, he charges toward her at full speed. The goddess simply waits for the attack, which closes in rapidly and causes another massive explosion. Jiwoo gives her no time to breathe and attacks again, blasting another section of the area. He continues his relentless assault, fragmenting a part of the planet. Urus is impressed, commenting that the entire continent is shaking and that, at this rate, it will be destroyed for good. The goddess, however, tells him it's no use. With a smile still on her face, she spreads her wings and flies up above the protagonist. Urus is surprised, while Jiwoo begins to sweat, exhaustion radiating from his body. The goddess's wings dissolve into feathers that begin to float around her. She walks toward him and asks what Mr. Heo would do, saying he must have been excited, thinking every day about how to take her life. She advises him to give up, because no matter how strong he gets or how much time passes, he will never be able to kill her. She repeats this, standing very close to him. Jiwoo stares at her for a few seconds, then closes his eyes, sighing as he looks up. He turns and takes a few steps back. The goddess asks where he is going and if he has finally given up. In response, the protagonist simply swings the stick a few times in the air. He says he was just seeing how hard he could swing it, thinking he might be able to snap it in two. The goddess replies that it won't work and that he will never be able to take her life, but the protagonist clarifies that his target wasn't her, but the entire planet. The goddess is utterly bewildered. Jiwoo explains that since he can't defeat her, he'll simply destroy the planet. That way, she'll either die in the explosion or be flung into the vacuum of space from the impact. The goddess stares at him in disbelief, questioning if such a feat is even possible for a mere human. The protagonist confirms, saying he will strike with all his might. He mentions that he did something similar earlier today, but he didn't even use his full strength. The goddess's expression turns grim. She argues that if he destroys the planet, he will die along with it, turning his act into a senseless suicide attack instead of revenge. She wants to know if he would be satisfied with that. Jiwoo, who had paid with his own life to learn, begins to laugh as he thinks about the truth of the game. The law of the jungle was all that mattered. He then tells her to listen carefully, because now it was their time to learn. People like her just don't understand. Raising the staff, Jiwoo repeats that you shouldn't mess with someone who has nothing to lose. The goddess becomes apprehensive and asks him to wait, but Jiwoo swings his stick with all his strength. The moment he strikes the ground, everything begins to shatter. The goddess and Urus are caught in the blast, while Jiwoo maintains a macabre smile on his face. That entire place is fragmented into 6 pieces, splitting planet Earth in the same proportion and then immediately exploding into a supernova. The event ripples through the entire Chrono-Life universe, destroying everything with just one full power blow from Jiwoo. Lines of data begin to scroll down a screen. Meanwhile, in the real world, inside a room with virtual reality pods, an attendant is sleeping during his shift. Suddenly, a player yells in frustration after being kicked out of Chrono-Life. He wonders why he was disconnected out of nowhere when they hadn't even reached the final boss. Other players also start questioning what happened, asking the attendant if he flipped the main switch, something he wasn't supposed to do. The employee, now awake, asks them to calm down, explaining that it wasn't a power outage or a tripped circuit breaker. A young man suggests it might be a server issue with Crowley, the game's company. Immediately, someone else shouts that an announcement just went up on their homepage. The notice confirms a server problem with Chrono-Life and states that the reopening date will be announced later. Everyone is shocked, finding it incredible that the server actually crashed. However, one player remains connected. His pod still showed it was in use, even with the server down. Back in the game, the system displays a synchronization notification. The client check updates to version 1.7 and checks for connected users. The current number was just one person. Jiwoo finds himself in an empty room, surrounded by floating data. He looks around, completely confused, and wonders where he is. This was strange, since he was supposed to be in the game. Suddenly, a mysterious voice mentions mentioned ST-389. He explained that this was the name of the planet he had just destroyed, a place known for its beauty in the fourth universe, and revealed that it was their mother's favorite place. Surprised, Jiwoo turned to the person who was speaking. Jiwoo asked who he was. The blonde man, however, simply told him to shut up, but then a macabre smile spread across his face as he answered, "I am God." The protagonist looked at him and sighed. "That's your identity, so it's none of my business," Jiwoo said. "Have you seen a woman with black hair around here?" God replied that it was just the two of them there. As if to confirm, a system screen appeared before the protagonist, showing that the current number of users was only 1. "What is wrong with you?" God questioned. "You took everyone's life. It should be common sense that no one could survive that explosion. Every living thing was wiped out." At this, the protagonist just laughed, leaving God confused by the reaction. Jiwoo then burst into laughter, shouting that his revenge was finally complete. He was overjoyed. This was why he played the game. "Urus, come out! I finally got my revenge!" he called out. But even after his call, nothing happened. Jiwoo slammed his stick on the ground, calling for his dragon again. "I already told you, it's just the two of us here," God repeated. "So you shouldn't expect that child to be here." The protagonist questioned him. "If the current number of users is only 1, then what are you? An NPC or the administrator?" God replied that he was neither, and as he tried to reveal his identity, something cracked in space-time and the sound of the rift cut off his voice. He sighed and complained that something was already interfering. A light shone in the middle of the room, illuminating Jiwoo's face. "This is disappointing, but it was great to meet you," said God. "Farewell, and say hi to the little furry one for me." "Wait!" Jiwoo shouted in surprise, but an intense light blinded them both, and the deity vanished before his eyes. Then the game server shut down, and the protagonist was disconnected. In the identity room, his was the only capsule still active. It hissed open, revealing Jiwoo's real body. The young man pulled the virtual reality headset from his head. "I can't believe this. Why the hell did he have to show up right now?" he grumbled. "And what was that about a furry little thing?" That's when he noticed a blonde man with a cigar in his mouth, staring fixedly at him. The man stood up and walked over to the protagonist, reciting his details. "Lee Jiwoo, age 21. You've been playing Chrono Life for 3 months, and your chosen weapon was the level 99 stick. Correct?" Jiwoo confirmed it, then demanded to know who he was. Removing his glasses, the man declared, "I'm the one who's going to steal your stick." Mentally, the protagonist reviewed his situation. He was just an ordinary college student who enjoyed playing Chrono Life. In fact, until recently, he was just a beginner, but by a stroke of luck, he'd managed to create a level 99 stick. With it, he had beaten up everyone he disliked, including the woman who cheated on him. Then, a man claiming to be God had appeared and vanished, and now, here he was, in a restaurant surrounded by guards. Food was served at their table. While the blonde man ate heartily, Jiwoo just watched. "Eat," the man said. "The lady who runs this place is a great cook," Jiwoo agreed, wondering what the hell was going on. The man explained that this was the gukbap restaurant he used to frequent when he was broke. "That was 15 years ago. My company was established during the early stages of Chrono Life's development." Putting the pieces together, Jiwoo realized who he was. "It can't be." The blonde man formally introduced himself. "I am the president of Chrono Life, Choi Deokbae. I thought you were a gangster. And who are these guys?" Jiwoo asked. "They're company employees, modelers, music directors, marketing leads," Deokbae replied. Jiwoo admitted he was scared, thinking they were mobsters, and asked why the president of Crowley had come after him personally. "Didn't I tell you in the capsule room? I've come to retrieve the level 99 stick." The protagonist was shocked to hear that. "Why that look on your face?" Deokbae asked. "As a game company, it's only natural for us to retrieve bugged items." "But I'm the one who enhanced it," Jiwoo protested. 3%, Deokbae replied. "That's the official success rate after enhancing an item 10 times, and of course after that the chance drops even lower. You probably know that." The revelation left Jiwoo stunned, but he argued that if it wasn't a bug, then there must be a chance of it happening. He stood up abruptly from the table, but Deokbae let out a deep sigh and warned, "The level 99 stick will be in my care." In the world of Chrono Life, near the town of Frontal, a giant monster was approaching an open field. It was a level 21 Garus. The party of players readied themselves, shouting that the monster was coming. The party's mage cast a fire spell, launching a fireball that engulfed the creature. The monster screamed in agony. The party leader celebrates that it worked and orders them to repeat the attack. However, a girl named Kiyo unleashes her power and runs alone towards the monster, screaming. The leader warns her not to advance alone. However, the girl is brutally attacked by the creature, which hurls her high into the air. She flies towards the group's priestess and lands on top of her, incapacitating them both. In a panic, the other members shout that they're in trouble and that they need to get up and run. Watching everything from a distance, the protagonist remains motionless for a moment, but soon lets out a quick sigh, wondering what he should do. Beside him, Urus boss eats a piece of chicken and asks what his Hyungnim intends to do. Jiwoo thinks for a moment, then picks up his stick, observing his normal stats. He then remembers the conversation he had at the restaurant. Deokbai had said he would keep the plus 99 stick, leaving Jiwoo completely apprehensive. The CEO, however, replied that it was the company's will. Jiwoo protested, saying it wasn't fair, but Deokbai explained that he had personally investigated and concluded that the stick was not a bugged item. From that moment on, the company would no longer interfere with his account. Whether he defeated the game's strongest boss, took the lives of 3 million people, or destroyed the entire planet, he was free to do whatever he wanted as a user. Next, Deokbai put more salted vegetables in his gukbap and offered them to Jiwoo, saying the decision to add them or not was entirely his. Jiwoo held the plate and stood up from the table. At that moment, however, the old lady who owned the restaurant smacked Deokbai on the head, scolding him for putting that in the gukbap. She complained that he would drive her crazy, as it made no sense for her to spend all night preparing the bone broth out of consideration for him, only to see him ruin it. Witnessing the scene, Jiwoo lowered the plate of vegetables. Back in the present, Jiwoo stares at his stick, thinking about the salted vegetable soup. His attention, however, is drawn to the leader of a nearby party, who is cursing. He questions what kind of useless player Kyontuka is, complaining that she doesn't know how to hold her position, which is the basic requirement for party hunting. According to him, she was acting like a troll, and because of that imbecile, they would have to hold back on the hunt, all just because she joined the party. Jiwoo remembers a favor Deokbae wanted to ask of him. He had said that, although it might sound suspicious, Chrono Life was a very good game. Freedom, romance, and adventure. It was a fantasy world larger than anyone could imagine. Therefore, he should avoid destroying things and simply enjoy himself. Jiwoo reflects on this for a few moments. Suddenly, the party leader spits on the girl, hitting her scarf squarely. He tells her to get lost, saying he won't hunt with her, and turns to leave, in disbelief that they were using the same items as her. Kaeyeon was kicked out of the party. Jiwoo watches the scene and sighs. He thinks that this is all a pain, but it was to be expected from the law of the jungle. Remembering Deokbae's words, he decides that he will indeed enjoy the game in his own way. After all, he wants his salted vegetable soup extra thick. With that in mind, he moves his staff and unleashes a blast of energy toward the group of adventurers, but stops the attack midway upon hearing a scream. Jiwoo looks back. Keon was screaming that this game was shit and that everyone could go to hell. She yells that those bastards have no eye for good things and that they should know how great her weapon was, since she spent a lot of money to buy that sword. Jiwoo watches her, surprised, remembering when he said the same things about his own sword. Back then, people had also looked at him strangely. Kaeyeon then shouts that she doesn't need any of them, and that she won't join any party to hunt. She would do it alone. Jiwoo reflects that he no longer knows what to think either. Just then, the girl hears the sound of a monster that had appeared right in front of her. In fact, she was surrounded by many other creatures and freezes in fear at the sight. The creatures open their mouths, let out a roar, and run in her direction, getting closer and closer. Kaeyeon tries to protect herself, but Jiwoo appears in front of her, asking himself why he made that choice. He moves his staff, launching a powerful attack at the monsters. Everything in that direction is completely annihilated. As the dust begins to settle, Kaeyeon, who was protecting her head, quickly opens her eyes and comes face to face with the protagonist. Above him, the sky was completely clear, without a single cloud. Jiwoo wonders if he acted out of solidarity or pity, but concludes it was for neither of those reasons. He did it because it seemed fun. With that thought, he gives the girl a smile, leaving her utterly confused. The protagonist approaches her, thinking that in any case the situation was a bit complicated and chaotic. This, then, was the prologue to the story. He asks if they could hunt together. The girl, however, tells him to get lost, saying she doesn't hunt with newbies, and walks away while spitting on the ground. Jiwoo is left confused, thinking that this wasn't a very smooth start. Meanwhile, in the city of Seoul, people were living their daily lives, but always with their phones in hand. An event had captured the world's attention, an event that people now call Judgment Day. An incessant debate was taking over the global gaming community. Everyone was asking who the player was that had taken the lives of 800,000 people. Was he a god of battle, the strongest in Chrono Life? However, one man declared that it was all a sham. He questioned how someone could be the strongest, claiming it had to be just a bug or a disgusting hacker. This was a fairly reasonable opinion. After all, fighting against 3 million enemies made no sense at all. It was a number that couldn't be overcome with just stats and control. The community cried out for justice, demanding that the hacker be banned forever and that the Chrono Life team do their job. So everyone was focused, awaiting the company's response. And finally, the announcement came. While one player was clamoring to bring out the guillotine, the the Chrono Life team declared that the user in question was a normal player. According to the investigation, he was not a hacker, nor was he abusing any bugs. Everyone was completely shocked by the news, and that was how the controversy came to an end. On the city streets, people were talking about the incident. The Chrono Life server had crashed because of that one player. Apparently, he had taken the lives of many in an instant, and everyone was talking about it, wondering what he was like in real life, since his face was covered by a hood in the only released photo. Meanwhile, Jiwoo smiled as he followed the girl he had just saved. Only the sound of their footsteps broke the silence between them. The girl, visibly irritated, stopped suddenly. Kion turned around and questioned him. "Why do you keep following me?" Jiwoo calmly replied that they should form a hunting party. "When did I agree to that?" she retorted. "Go hunt with someone as poor and indecent as you." Jiwoo didn't understand the insult. Kion continued, pointing at his clothes. "You're just wearing underwear beneath that cloak and carrying a level 1 stick that only newbies use. I don't have time to play around with a noob. Get out of here," Jiwoo questioned. "Indecent? I just saved you, getting rid of those monsters with a single attack." Urus, in his mind, commented that he had seen everything. The human's eyes had been closed when he saved her. Jiwoo realized, so she doesn't know I'm strong. A smile formed on his face as he thought, how about I hide my power for a while? He ran after Kion, calling out to her, "Miss, please, carry me." The girl looked at him confused. Jiwoo explained, "Actually, I don't know anything about the game. I'm a newbie. Please, master, carry me." The word master sparked a flicker of happiness in Kion. She remembered how the leader of her old party had looked down on her, and being called master made her visibly excited. Urus questioned what his Hyungnim was doing. Jiwoo whispered back that he was pretending to be weak to hide his power as the first step of his plan. The dragon remembered the idea he had told him about before. Kion cleared her throat, trying to look serious. "It's embarrassing, but anyway, I'm someone who should help newbies." She then invited him to join her party. "This expert here will help you, but just this once." Kion was a level 24 fighter, with her stats focused entirely on strength, neglecting her other abilities. Near the starting town at the dungeon entrance, Kion charged toward a screaming creature. She landed a powerful punch on the monster, making the level 4 rabbit bear spit blood. The creature was thrown backward. Without giving it time to react, another monster appeared behind her, but Kion dodged it with an agile leap. She lets out a sharp breath and performs an aerial flip. The rabbit bear looks up in shock as she descends with a ready kick. It was her fallen dragon's stomp, which smashes the monster into the ground. The other rabbit bears are confused, but they soon regroup and surround her. Kion holds her fighting stance, taunting, "You can all come at this master at once." Sitting on the floor, Jiwoo watches the scene. She's a pretty good fighter, isn't she? He wonders. Urus agrees with his Hyungnim. The protagonist, however, comments that no matter how low level the monsters are, being surrounded by so many of them would still be dangerous. Urus replies that there's no need to worry, since that human has excellent gear. Her weapon alone costs around 10 million gold. Jiwoo shouts in shock, "That's 10 million won!" Urus adds that all of her gear is superb, and the total value must be around 100 million. Jiwoo wonders how she, a newbie, could have all that. The dragon then reveals she's a pay-to-win player. Jiwoo remembered Kion shouting that those bastards had no eye for quality and didn't know how good her items were because she had spent a fortune on the game. He wondered if she had really spent that much, thinking there was no reason to invest 100 million. Suddenly, Kion turns and shouts at Jiwoo. Kion turns and, "Even if I'm carrying you, you shouldn't just sit there doing nothing. Hit them with that stick of yours." Jiwoo is confused. The girl insists, "That's right. You have to fight for yourself to get stronger and faster. Stop being such a useless bum." As she scolds him, a rabbit bear tries to attack her from behind. "Your behavior is unacceptable. It's like you don't even have the will to get stronger," she continues, oblivious to the danger. However, Jiwoo simply touches the monster with his stick, and it is completely annihilated, disappearing without a trace. Kion looks to the side, confused. What was that? Why was there a sudden gust of wind inside a dungeon? She wonders. Jiwoo thinks to himself that he was screwed, since he had no idea how to hide his power. At that moment, a message arrives for Kion. The sender orders her to log off immediately, would be starting in 10 minutes. Kion reads the message and sighs deeply. She tells Jiwoo she's logging off for a bit and will be back in about 30 minutes, telling him to keep hunting the monsters. Jiwoo is puzzled. What's her deal? Just leaving whenever she feels like it? He thinks. He wonders what she does in real life to have spent 100 million on a game. Urus doesn't know either, but speculates that perhaps she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. The scene shifts to a luxurious building. Inside a room, Kion is lying down, wearing her virtual reality headset. She disconnects from chrono life, gets out of bed, and sighs. She looks at the device, lost in thought about everything that had happened. A smile forms on her face as she remembers the protagonist. Suddenly, the door bursts open and her producer storms in, shouting, "You mad woman!" The producer raged that she was still sitting there using that thing and must have decided to quit her job. Kian yelled back that she was just taking it off and that the producer should open her damn eyes, but she was only called a game addict in return. The producer then ordered Kian to hurry up and sit down, as they had less than 10 minutes. She continued to yell at her for playing with her glasses on again, reminding her that she was told to take them off when using the headset because it leaves a mark on her nose. Kian replied that she gets anxious if she doesn't wear her glasses, and that the mark could be hidden with makeup. Her producer gave her a cold stare, then sighed, muttering what a pain this was, but that she needed to sit down quickly. If it weren't for the money, she would have wrung her neck by now. The makeup was placed on the table, and the producer took off Kian's glasses, quickly preparing her for her job. The girl removed her hair tie, letting her hair fall loose. On a music show stage, the host shouts, thanking everyone who had waited so long and announcing that this would be the final performance of Music Banking. She had been in first place for 13 consecutive weeks, a popular idol, the best singer-songwriter of the moment. Presenting to you all, Han Sarang. Sarang begins to sing about her first love. Afterwards, she greets everyone and introduces herself. Han Sarang is an idol, a singer, and a songwriter. Her hobby, unknown to the public, is online gaming. Back in the dungeon, the rabbit bears start running toward the protagonist. Ji-woo says he needs to practice a bit before she gets back. Urus asks what kind of practice that would be. The protagonist replies that if he wants to hide his power, he needs to learn how to control it. In other words, he's going to try attacking without killing. The image of a massive explosion extends out from the planet. A divine being watches it all with a smile, commenting that the idea of attacking without killing sounds like a lot of fun. He turns to a motherly figure, an immense sun at her back, and asks if she agrees. Han Sarang was a second-year high school student. She entered the music industry at a very young age and had a difficult, unpopular start, but now she has established herself as the top singer-songwriter of today. A journalist congratulates Sarang, saying he can't believe she's won first place 14 times in a row. He says he loves the sad lyrics of her debut song, based on the story of The Little Mermaid, and wants to know how she manages to write such moving lyrics. Sarang replies that she likes to stay home alone, so she reads poetry collections and sometimes even fairy tales. The journalist notes that this must be why the song has that title, and Sarang adds that her producer asked her not to talk about the fairy tale, as it would be embarrassing and a rather childish hobby. The interviewer is charmed, along with the entire audience. He exclaims that this is very interesting, and the girl thanks him. Her producer watches from a distance, complaining that the damn schemer was fooling the entire country, and that it was all an absurd lie. The hobby the public doesn't know about is that she loves to play games. In the interview, the host comments that Sarang is also popular for her acting, and that he heard she played an interesting role in her last drama, a bratty high school girl. Sarang confirms, saying she had a hard time with that role, since she had never once cursed since the day she was born. However, inside the game, she was the complete opposite, calling Ji-woo a damn bastard. She scolds him, saying her master had returned and he didn't even greet her. Ji-woo, confused, asks since when she was his master, and Sarang yells that it's from now on. She challenges him, wanting to know if he was complaining and didn't want to be carried by her anymore, but Ji-woo quickly denies it. Sarang is the type to release the stress of her daily life by playing games. Urus, in turn, advises his Hyung-nim to get rid of that rude person, but Ji-woo replies that he needs to hide his power, as he has to pretend to be weak. Sarang then orders him to repeat after her, "Lovely master." She forces him to repeat it several times, while Urus thinks to himself that his idea worked. On the way to the dungeon, Sarang stops and asks if he practiced a lot by hunting monsters. Ji-woo just sighs, explaining that it was a process that required extreme patience, and that his journey is still far from over. Urus shouts that it was useless to hit without dealing damage, but the protagonist tells him to shut up. Sarang laughs, commenting that he's an eccentric newbie, and that she was looking forward to this. She then notes that she still doesn't know his name, and asks what the underpants guy's character name is. Ji-woo is surprised, thinking he had already told her, and tries to say his name, but the girl interrupts him, announcing she can just call him Underpants. "That sounds good," she says. The protagonist, frustrated, asks why she wanted to know his name then. Meanwhile, some people are spying on the pair from a distance. A bearded man says he found her. His subordinate asks what they should do, and the leader replies that they must gather all the guild members in that dungeon, because today they would demand justice. Further ahead, a rabbit bear rises. The level 22 monster approaches the girl. Sarang orders Underpants to go, and the protagonist obeys like a puppy, approaching the monster as they both scream. The protagonist plays dumb, approaching like a complete idiot. Then, he slowly brings his staff forward, meticulously touching a single hair on the creature. Suddenly, the rabbit bear is wounded, its head brutally crushed. Without understanding anything at all, it falls to the ground. However, its HP doesn't reach 0, with only a single bar of health remaining. Jiwoo is pleased that the monster is still alive, reflecting that his hit-without-killing strategy was a success. Sarang celebrates, saying he defeated it on the first try and has gotten very strong. Suddenly, a dagger flies in her direction. Sarang senses the danger and quickly grabs Jiwoo's shirt to pull him away, deflecting the weapon with a precise kick. The bearded man catches his dagger back in midair, his face contorted, and comments that she's incredible, but that she should give the credit to her gear. Sarang questions him, asking who he is. The man, called Mr. Kim, asks if she has already forgotten his voice, feigning hurt. He reveals that everyone there are members of the Halasan Guild. Upon hearing the name, Sarang repeats it with contempt. Mr. Kim jokes that it's been a while and now wants to know what the two of them are plotting. Then, he orders his subordinates to attack. Sarang warns Jiwoo to get back, as it's dangerous, and assumes a battle stance. The assassins charge forward with their weapons drawn. With a swift movement, she lands a direct kick to the face of one of them, who bleeds and is knocked out instantly. Sarang uses his body as a foothold to leap, performing an acrobatic flip in the air. She shouts the skill name, "Fallen Dragon Stomp!" and strikes the ground with force, sending all the assassins flying. Their leader yells for everyone to attack at once. Observing the scene, Jiwoo asks what's happening, and Urus replies that he doesn't know. The protagonist, however, comments that he can guess based on what he's seeing. He deduces that the Halasan Guild members have picked a fight with Sarang in the past, and, despite having fought a few times, they always end up losing. Apparently, that man doesn't know when to quit, and has come once again seeking revenge. Jiwoo also notes that they are all weak, a group around level 20 being completely destroyed by her, and Urus agrees. As the fight continues, Kim comments that everything is going as planned. With Sarang distracted, he signals for the other girl to begin. A new figure vanishes from her position with a quick dash and reappears behind Sarang, pointing her claws in her direction. Sarang turns, surprised, and notices her opponent is empty-handed, concluding she must be from the fighter class. The woman then activates the steal skill. A bright light illuminates the area, momentarily blinding Sarang. She is shocked to realize that her battle fists have simply vanished. The thief remarked that the weapons were incredible. Darling must have been born with a silver spoon in her mouth to own the silencing fist. Jiwoo asked what kind of skill that was, and Urus replied that it was steal from the rogue class. However, he found it strange, as the skill wasn't supposed to be that overpowered. Jiwoo scoffed, saying he didn't care since she had nothing to steal from him. After all he had was his underwear and his cloak. But then, he remembered the existence of his stick. Jiwoo glanced to the side with a terrified smile. He then shot to his feet and ran off, screaming in fear. Kim remarked that, come to think of it, there was someone else there, but they weren't worth worrying about. Just one look at the kid was enough to tell he was a rookie with nothing of value. As Jiwoo backed away, the thief grew excited. She tossed the fists to Kim, saying that he might not know it, but stealing from someone who has nothing is even more fun. In an instant, she appeared in front of the protagonist, calling him darling, and asking where he was off to. Jiwoo was startled as she pointed her hands at him, thinking this was no time to hide his power. He gripped the staff and attempted a quick slash, but to his surprise, nothing happened. Everyone was stunned, including Urus. When the smoke cleared, Jiwoo was empty-handed, his main weapon gone, staring at the thief. She simply informed him that the stick was all hers now, making the protagonist break out in a cold sweat. She threatened to steal his hood, saying that, except for his underwear, he'd be left completely naked. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the thief's face. The girl wondered what it was. She then saw the true form of Urus before her. The entity questioned how an arrogant mortal dared to wield him without knowing who he was. The girl fell to the ground, utterly terrified, dropping the weapon near the protagonist. Jiwoo looked at his stick and picked it back up. The system announced that Urus's soul refused to acknowledge the enemy, and that the protagonist was the weapon's true owner. Urus emerged from a part of the stick, questioning how anyone dared to try and claim him, stating that no one could possess him, except for Hyungnim. It seemed the thief had overestimated herself. Jiwoo then touched his head. He patted the dragon's head, making him embarrassed. The thief, trembling in fear, coughed and backed away from the protagonist, unable to understand what had just happened. She wondered what that was. Was it a ghost? No, it felt too real for that. Kim asks what her problem is, wondering if she's forgotten her job. The thief stands up, retorting that wouldn't happen, as she is a professional mercenary who only cares about money. At that moment, Sarang approaches, shouting, and tries to land a kick on the girl. "Give me back my weapon, you little thief." The thief dodges and comments, "You scared me. What a fierce surprise attack. However, I'm afraid you're after the wrong target. The weapon is over there." Watching the scene, Kim clenches his fists with a smile on his face. Sarang complains, calling them bastards and promising to take their lives, but she suddenly begins to fall, fainting after a touch from the protagonist. Jiwoo explains that this is his skill, strike without killing. The confused thief asks what he's doing and if the two of them weren't together. The protagonist simply replies that he was hiding his power. "What the hell are you talking about?" she questions, but is immediately struck by a blast of force from him. In an instant, all the assassins are defeated with ease. The thief is bewildered by the sight and asks, "Darling, did you do this?" Jiwoo hits her on the head with the stick, replying, "Yes, I did." The thief's HP drops to a single bar. Jiwoo uses his strike without killing skill again and says, "I've been through a lot of shit, so I've become much stronger mentally. However, just a moment ago, because of you, I nearly had a heart attack trying to move my stick." His power explodes, devastating everything around him. Sarang suddenly wakes up, lying on the ground in an open field, feeling a bit confused. She gets up, startled by the situation. From behind a tree, Jiwoo asks if she's awake. The girl is surprised and calls him Panty Boy, wanting to know where they were and what happened to those guys. Jiwoo replies that they are near the dungeon and that the enemies have left. "What do you mean? And why did I suddenly faint?" she questions. It's then that Sarang notices the fists in her hands. Realizing her weapons were back, Jiwoo asked if it had been the Halasan Guild, wanting to know what kind of job they did, who they were, and what they were up to. The girl blushed at the question, wondering why he was being so nice and if, by any chance, he wanted to go to hell. But soon after, she sighed with a smile on her face. She said she would tell him since he got involved because of her, and then asked if he had ever heard of the term pay to win. Jiwoo asked what that was. Urus explained it was a term used in online games. The protagonist wanted to know how he knew that, since he was just a game NPC, and Urus replied that he had looked it up on Wikipedia. He began to explain it exactly as it was written on the site, but Sarang interrupted him and simplified it. They're users who spend billions on games. That's basically what it means. Jiwoo asked if she was talking about the Halasan Guild, and the girl confirmed, saying they were all that type of people. She explained that a few months ago, she had bought those fists by chance at an auction, and one day, the Halasan Guild started hunting her to try and steal them. However, they're a bunch of old thugs and their skills are crap, so I won every one of our encounters. Anyway, how did you get these back? Did you steal them from them? Jiwoo replied that they just left the fists there and went away. Maybe they had forgotten them. The girl said she didn't know what had happened, but she was sure they would come after her again, as that crazy old man's obsession was no joke. Jiwoo commented that it was a bit strange, and asked why they were so insistent on getting her weapon. Sarang replied, questioning if it wasn't obvious, since the fists cost 10 million gold. The protagonist retorted that for that very reason, it was strange. These old guys spend billions and they're obsessed with a 10 million gold weapon? There's definitely more to this story. Later, at the Halasan Guild's hideout, Kim's blood splattered across the room as he was wounded, falling to the floor right in front of his leader. Kim cried out that he was sorry and begged for another chance, but his leader told him to shut up, calling them all useless. He said he couldn't waste any more time and would leave the mission to the 4 heavenly kings. Kim glanced to the side. 3 people approached and stood before the leader. The 2nd heavenly king said it made no sense for that guy to be in the same division as them, having only 100 million gold. The 3rd king, however, spoke up, saying that was why they had told them to kick out little Kim. But it was a problem since the great Hyung Nim was too soft-hearted. The 1st heavenly king remained silent. Then, the 2nd king knelt down near Kim, saying that hiring a mercenary had been a pathetic strategy, and that was why he had failed. However, the 1st king intervened, saying to leave the matter to him. He ran a hand through his hair, mentioning that the silencing fist, or whatever it was, would take effect in 12 hours. Upon hearing this, their leader burst into an absurd fit of joyous laughter. He exclaimed that it was great to be called Lord King, with a total net worth of 12 billion. He then ordered his subordinates to show them the terror of the Halasan Guild. The blood festival had begun. However, Jiwoo suddenly appeared in their base, silently scratching his nose. Everyone stared at him, completely bewildered. Jiwoo broke the silence, scoffing. A bunch of kids laughing about a blood festival? He openly mocked the 4 heavenly kings. The king, irritated, questioned who he was and where he came from. Jiwoo simply told them to try and figure it out for themselves and, in a gesture of pure disdain, picked his nose. He commented to himself that it would be difficult to keep hiding his powers and pretending to be weak if they kept bothering Sarang. Then he started laughing again, mocking their titles once more, and declared he would end this without any more delay. The king sighed in anger, calling him a crazy bastard, and ordered his subordinates to finish him. The men rushed forward, preparing their best attacks and closing in at a frightening speed. Jiwoo, however, just kept a smile on his face. With a simple swing of his staff, he unleashed a blast of power that obliterated all the attackers. They were defeated by a mere twig. twig. Meanwhile, outside the house, a girl approached, humming cheerfully. Back in the fight, the first Heavenly King charged at Jiwoo, who defeated him with a single, simple strike of his staff, making him spit blood. Suddenly, an explosion split the house in two. The approaching girl, the goddess of life, was startled for a moment, but a smile soon spread across her face as she immediately recognized who was responsible. The leader, the Lord King, yelled for all remaining members of the Halasan Guild to attack at once. Facing the new threat, Jiwoo simply sighed, gripping his staff firmly. Jiwoo commented that if they wanted to take his life, they should bring at least 3 million people. He then moved his staff, delivering a blow that struck one of the assassins in the face and caused an explosion that shot toward the sky. With a smile on his face, Jiwoo swung his twig to the right, defeating everyone in that area. The king watches the scene with a grim expression, completely terrified by what he sees. As he gets up, Kim calls out to his Hyungnim, warning him to hurry and run or he'll be annihilated. The king, however, thinks that Kim doesn't understand the situation. With the exception of himself and his direct subordinates, all the guild members were pay-to-win warriors. Even the weakest of the new recruits had spent at least 10 million, and not even the top 5 guilds could look down on them. But who was this guy, and how could he do all this? Suddenly, the king realizes something. He thinks they don't stand a chance, that perhaps this man is the one from the rumors, the one who defeated everyone. Staring at Jiwoo in terror, his mouth falls open as he remembers the stick underwear guy. He first started playing in the 2nd grade. Back then, games weren't as flashy as they are today, and leveling up wasn't easy since there were no quests or raids. But still, it was a lot of fun for 9-year-old Wang. He'd get scolded by his parents for secretly playing at night, and he cherishes the memories of leveling up with his friends. As the years went by, he grew older and was swept away by his responsibilities, living a busy life with no time to reminisce about the past. Suddenly, he realized he was already in his 40s, now known as CEO Wang. He's in front of his computer in a pristine room. A subordinate enters, calling him Hyungnim and saying he found the old monitor he'd asked for. Wang wanted to give himself a special gift, a piece of a bygone era, since he had worked harder than anyone. The subordinate asks if he really needs to switch to that old computer. Since it's an online game, he could just play on a new one. Wang replies that it's for the vibe. His heart was racing, as if he had gone back in time. It felt like meeting a first love all over again. However, he grits his teeth as he realizes something. He wasn't the only one who had been changed by the ravages of time. Jiwoo strikes another subordinate with his staff, sending the man crashing to the ground. As an immense tremor shakes the entire area, the king stands frozen, trembling in fear at the scene before him. Jiwoo says it's almost over, with only the 2 of them left to defeat. The king remains silent as the protagonist draws closer. This was the end for the pay-to-win players. He wonders why they need to steal other players' gear, especially since they're men of nobility. It's time for the old man to get a beating. The king remembers being at his computer, typing quickly until his payment of 12 billion won was confirmed. Wang repeats that he wasn't the only one changed by the turmoil of time. He doesn't need to put in any effort. With just a few clicks and some spending, he can become as strong as he wants. And with that strength, players who spent little to no money suffer. Pay to win was the current state of online gaming. Wang stands up from his chair. Still, he continued to explore various games, but they were all the same. And finally, the most critically acclaimed game, Chrono Life, where he wanted to find, no matter how, that thing he had long forgotten. That thing from back then, from when he was a child. The stick approaches him and strikes his head. Jiwoo uses his strike without killing skill. Wang spits blood and falls to the ground, defeated. Kim tries to call out to his Hyungnim. Jiwoo announces that, as of today, the Halasan Guild is finished. He says it's a pain, so they shouldn't bother Captain Amor anymore. In any case, he'll see them never again, and then he leaves. Wang tries to get up from the ground, questioning if it was really him, the guy who had defeated the 5 major guilds not long ago and annihilated 3 million members of the World Guild. Jiwoo looks back without saying a word. Wang lets out a laugh at this, asking how much he had spent, as he must have used a lot of money to achieve that strength. However, soon he too will realize that all his efforts so far have been to fight for something that doesn't even exist. From a distance, Kim looks at his Hyungnim. Jiwoo replies that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, but that he also spent a hefty sum. Wang asks how much it was, thinking it could be tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of won, but the protagonist replies that he spent 55,000 won on the warrior's starter pack. Wang is stunned by this and left speechless. Speechless, the protagonist continues to walk away. A smile spreads across Wang's face as he repeats the amount, 55,001. He remembered his childhood, when he used to play Ragnarok, and then he began to laugh excitedly, bursting into a fit of laughter and leaving Kim completely confused. Wang asked how many games they had tried after Ragnarok, and Kim replied that it must have been about 8. The boss kept laughing, saying that game was a lot of fun. Chrono Life was indeed divine, the goddess of life confirmed as she appeared. Hello everyone from the Hallison Guild, it's a beautiful night. She looked around. It's been a while since I've been here, but the guild's hideout is in terrible shape. She turned and asked, and what about that thing? Did you manage to prepare it? Wang replied that the preparations were going well, but she cut him off, asking why he was dwelling on the past. The man said he was out of it, as their agreement to cooperate ended now. The goddess of life was surprised for a moment, but then she smiled. Is that so? With a swift movement of her scepter, she sliced through the air. Kim watched the scene terrified and open-mouthed as Wang fell to the ground, his body split in two. His subordinate tried to scream his boss's name, calling out for his Hyung Nim. The goddess of life walked calmly. I should have asked why he did that, but I'm not in a good mood, so it doesn't matter. She plunged the staff into Kim's back, causing blood to splash onto her own face. In shock and crying out in pain, Kim tried to move, but he was quickly defeated. The goddess continued to watch the scene, a smile forming on her face as she remembered what the protagonist had said. His hair turned black, and his clothes returned to normal. He spoke the captain's name aloud, Amor. His kill count reached 998,999,999. The system announced that he had annihilated the Halasan Guild, and that his combat experience was being calculated, raising the total to 999,000 kills. Jiwoo was confused by the announcement. The system then notified him that he had reached the highest level. What the hell is this? The young man wondered. What is it? Urus asked. Didn't you hear that crap? The system just said I reached the max level or something. Jiwoo opened his status window. His class was Novice, and he was at level 999 with almost 5,000 unallocated points. He and Urus stared at it, understanding absolutely nothing. They both wondered what this was all about. In the game called Chrono Life, the world's best virtual reality game, ranked first in active users, cumulative subscribers, sales, and ratings, reaching the max level was considered impossible. In an interview, Lee Sang-hyuk, the professional gamer known as Faker, had said it would be impossible to achieve such a feat anytime soon. Despite players all over the world playing day and night, no one had managed to reach level 999, the master level. Faker said he wasn't certain, but that even if all the top rankers in the world, including himself, defeated monsters 24 hours a day, it could take several decades to accomplish the feat. Jiwoo remained completely confused about his stats reaching that level. Urus, on the other hand, was celebrating that he was the world's first level master. Just as expected of Hyung Nim, he was very proud. Jiwoo was sure he had been level 7 back then. It was the obvious result of his actions. On the first day he picked up the stick, 800,000 players were murdered. On top of that, countless monsters and dungeons had been in the path of his attack. Adding the experience from Chrono Life's strongest boss, Urus, and the army from the highest level dungeon, the final push came from the massacre of the 3 million members of the World Guild Alliance. And of course, the destruction of the planet was also included. Thus, the world's first level master was born. A light appeared under the protagonist's feet, illuminating everything around him. The system announced that because he had reached the maximum level, the player would enter a transcendental space, teleporting him away. In another corner of the city, Sarang was lying down, looking at the sky and doing nothing. She muttered that she was bored and that this whole thing was starting to piss her off. She stood up, wondering where that underwear-wearing bastard was. He had told her to wait a bit, but the sun had already set. She thought for a moment more, remembering he had mentioned the Halasan Guild, and that she was supposed to tell him everything about them. Sarang sighed and lay down again, shouting, "Whatever, this gentle master will wait 1 more hour." On a piece of land floating in space, Jiwoo found himself in the center of a strange temple. He wondered where he was, looking up at the sky without understanding a single thing. He wondered why he was being dragged all over the place lately. It had been the same when he met God and Diokbai. Suddenly, a voice welcomed the human child. "I never imagined we would meet so soon. You are truly extraordinary." That voice echoed, making everything around it tremble. The being introduced himself as the guide of transcendence, the god of class, welcoming him. He praised him for taking the first step on that arduous journey, stating that his efforts to reach the master level as a novice were worthy of everyone's respect. Urus questioned how that was possible, asking if he had forgotten to change his class. Jiwoo denied it, explaining that he used to be an an aspiring prosecutor. At that moment, the conditions were met, and the transition to the secret class began. An intense light reached his body, and several spheres formed in front of him. One of them took the shape of a sword symbol and struck him at maximum speed. The soul of the sword infiltrated his body. Soon after, other spheres, representing various weapons, also appeared. The soul of the shield, the bow, the wand, the gauntlets, the spear, and many others infiltrated him, one by one. All the souls of the weapons were now inside his body. Jiwoo felt the power flow as the system notified him that the class change was complete. Now, he was a master class novice. As a privilege, all of his distributed status points would be retrieved and then tripled. Suddenly, his status window began to change. All attributes returned to the base value of 5, and 15,000 undistributed points were added. Urus was completely shocked. 14,985 points? What is happening? Is this all because of the class change effects? Jiwoo asked if that surprised him more than the change to a secret class, and Urus confirmed it. Normally, you only get 5 points when you level up, but you got 15,000. Even if other max level users exist, your raw stat points are already 3 times higher than theirs. This shit is ridiculous. This will be considered the greatest achievement in the history of the gaming community. Ignoring the dragon, Jiwoo began to analyze those values. A chilling smile spread across his face as he began to dump the points into a single stat, clicking repeatedly. Hyung-nim, what are you doing? Urus asked, incredulous. I'm distributing the stats, Jiwoo replied calmly. I know that, but I'm talking about this careless distribution. If you waste a single point, you'll be considered a loser. The dragon's expression changed to pure panic. Why are you putting everything into one stat? And why that stat of all things? Jiwoo finished distributing all his points and said, I don't need any others for now. This is enough. You've screwed everything up, Urus complained. You're just a loser. At the Chrono Life Company, an employee rushed in, warning the president that they had a problem. Deokbae asked what happened, and the employee replied that he needed to see it for himself, as the issue concerned that particular user. In the control room, Deokbae approached and asked what was going on. His subordinate simply told him to look at the monitor. Deokbae was surprised. Ah, the stick kid finally reached max level. The employee replied that the level wasn't the problem, but what he was doing. What's all this fuss about? And which stat did he choose? Deokbae asked. The employee pointed to the screen, showing the chosen stat, which impressed the president. However, Deokbae soon burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, he really loves this game. He's enjoying it to the fullest in his own way. The employee insisted it was no time for jokes, arguing that it would be a completely useless and pointless character. If he realizes he's building a trash character, who knows what he'll do when he gets angry? Deokbae, however, just told him to relax. I've said this many times. The game company has no right to interfere with a player's choices. The employee tried to argue that they needed to take some action, but the president was already walking away. As he walked away, Deokbae thought to himself, I can't believe he dumped everything into that one stat, and even got the Novice Master title. He was surprised they were calling it a trash character with no future, because in the history of virtual reality games, the worst, and at the same time, the strongest character has just been created. Back in the game, Jiwoo finished his stat allocation with a smile on his face. The god of classes then manifested. Transcendental, listen. This is the final step of the guidance. You have an important choice to make. The right to one of the transcendental weapons I wield will be granted to you. Jiwoo was delighted. How lucky. If it's free, there's no way I'm turning it down. He wondered which of the weapons he should choose because, to be honest, they all looked incredible. He thought for a few seconds and then announced his decision. Jiwoo held out his hand and commanded, Give me all of them. The divine being didn't react at first. Then it addressed the human child, stating that it could not fulfill such a request. Excessive greed leads to unnecessary wrath. Choose wisely. Jiwoo cut him off. Are you going to give me everything now, or would you rather I beat the hell out of you first? Everyone watching the scene is left in complete shock. Back in the control room, Deokbae takes the cigar out of his mouth. He is also in shock, thinking, this guy is a complete madman. The god of classes doesn't answer, but a system notification announces that he is furious. The god of classes' expression changes completely. Their relationship has now turned hostile, and the deity moves in for combat. Jiwoo holds his staff and says he understands, as the god was clearly asking for a beating. Both of them prepare to fight. A shield flies toward him. Jiwoo wields his staff to defend himself, but the object hits him with tremendous force, smashing him into the ground. Urus calls out for his Hyungnim, shocked. The The god of classes in turn laments, I never thought I would take the life of a transcendent with my own hands. It is such a pity. Suddenly he is struck squarely by a blast of energy from the staff, which melts half of his face. From the ground, Jiwoo comments, that hurt. Is it because you're a god? His health bar had only decreased slightly, as his constitution stat was now at 15,000 points. This attribute affects maximum HP, recovery, and immunity to adverse conditions. Urus watches everything, dumbfounded, thinking how insane he was for putting all his points into a single stat. Young Neem, you've made a fatal mistake. You've turned into a shitty character, he yells. Jiwoo just asks why. Urus explains that all equipment in Chrono Life has a weight requirement, demanding a minimum amount of strength, regardless of the class. Simply put, he wouldn't be able to equip anything other than that twig. This is all I need, the protagonist replies. At that moment, a system screen appears between the two. It was a hidden skill, and its various conditions had just been met. What is that? Urus asks. The skill Healing Factor converted all damage received into immediate healing, completely filling his HP bar. A shitty character, huh? Jiwoo taunts, while Urus remains in a state of shock. The god of classes groans in pain, his face disfigured. Insignificant mortal. How dare you? He roars, shooting beams from his eyes. Jiwoo takes the attack head-on, without even trying to dodge, and falls to the ground. Urus runs toward him, shouting his Hyungnim's name, but Jiwoo just bursts into laughter. As expected, Chrono Life is too good, he exclaims as his chest completely regenerates. How disgusting, Urus thinks. Perish, you tainted worm, the god shouts, delivering blow after blow. Jiwoo simply absorbs all the attacks. His health would drop for an instant, only to regenerate immediately after. The god of classes continued to attack, non-stop, in a completely futile cycle. But Jiwoo took every attack without reacting, just laughing. His HP endlessly dropped and rose. He then remarked that this was enough and that he would end it now. After all, thanks to the god, he had benefited in many ways, so it was time for the enemy to hand over all the weapons and disappear. The god of classes warned the human child that his endless greed would one day consume him. When that day came, he would be doomed. But Jiwoo just prepared for his attack, saying he simply didn't care. He then delivered an upward slash that struck the god of classes squarely. The system notified that the god of classes had ceased to exist. Reality began to fragment, shattering into dozens of pieces. The system informed him that the transcendent space would collapse and that he would be forced to return to his original world. That world began to shrink until it closed completely. Back in the ordinary world of Chrono Life, a light suddenly reached the hill, bringing Jiwoo back to the ground. All the weapons fell to the ground around him. They were all kinds of transcendent weapons, and Jiwoo had become the owner of them all. They then began to glow as they were transported to a subspace, from where they would always answer his call. A smile spread across Jiwoo's face, thinking that this would be great. However, Sarang was completely irritated. How dare that punk make her wait? She would never let this slide, no matter the excuse. Suddenly, a noise was heard behind her. Jiwoo placed his fingers on his forehead and said, "Hello, I'm back." His face was immediately met with a fist. She kicked him, complaining that she had said she would only wait a little while, but it was already night. Jiwoo apologized, saying he thought he would be back sooner, but some things had delayed him. In any case, he was here now. Sarang gritted her teeth and shouted that she was leaving. Jiwoo asked where she was going, and the girl replied that she was going to log out of the game. He just waved goodbye. Sarang gritted her teeth once more, but did nothing else. She warned him to log into the game tomorrow night at 7 p.m., which was when she got off work, and if he was late again, she would take his life for real. Jiwoo watched her disappear from the game, commenting that she still did whatever she wanted. Urus then asked about that development. Jiwoo stood up, announcing that he was also leaving, as it was already past midnight in the real world. The system asked if he wished to log out, and Jiwoo confirmed. Outside, in the identity room, Jiwoo walked out as the attendant thanked him and asked him to come back another day. The protagonist let out a quick yawn. He thought the day had been great and that Chrono Life was really fun. Furthermore, he began to wonder how much he could sell the transcendent weapons for. Being the first items of their kind, they would probably be worth a lot of money. However, he wondered if they were tradable items, as it would be a huge disappointment if he couldn't sell them. His attention was drawn to a shop behind him, and he wondered if he should get a bowl of gukbap. However, upon looking at his empty wallet, he decided against it. He continued walking, saddened, thinking about how tired he was of being so poor. The game's monthly fee kept rising, and he would need to pick up more shifts at his part-time job. As he walked through the city, he suddenly stopped. Wait a minute, he muttered to himself, remembering Urus mentioning that the total cost of the equipment would be 10 million, and that the rest of the set would reach 100 million won. An idea sparked in his mind. What if he could sell the game items and exchange them for real money? With this realization, Jiwoo turns and runs back to the identity room. All rankers in Chrono Life knew of a forbidden place, the intersection of life, the tomb of all mortals. It was the highest level hunting ground in the game's history, one that no one had ever managed to conquer. For unknown reasons, it was kept secret, and it was there, in the Valley of the Undead, Urus's domain, that Jiwoo now found himself. Urus, dressed in an impeccable butler outfit, welcomes Jiwoo to his home. The hunter, however, keeps walking and ignores him, a smile spreading across his face as he announces he'll be in his care. Urus agrees and asks Hyung Nim to enjoy himself as much as he can. Jiwoo declares that he was so blinded by revenge, he didn't even think to pick up the items he'd left behind, but today, he would make good use of them. Urus, the dragon, just thinks to himself that he feels sorry for his friends. Suddenly, a blast of energy descends upon the area. Amidst the smoke, Urus's army emerges, advancing on Jiwoo from all sides. Jiwoo smiles. At that very moment, his life of misery was coming to an end. He was going to make a hell of a lot of money because he was about to get rich in an instant. The Valley of Ghosts, the highest level hunting ground, was completely obliterated by the Stick Strike. Turbot of Despair, Lapis of the Abyss, and Trishan of the Dawn, the three strongest in Urus's army, were erased from existence in the same manner. With just 2 attacks, all the monsters in the valley were annihilated, and their weapons dropped to the ground. Valuable items rained down. Urus commented that it was all over in an instant, and that they had made out quite well. Jiwoo, however, questioned if it was really over, stating that it was just the beginning. Confused, Urus asked what he meant. The hunter then pointed to the smoke, telling him to look, as the monsters had already reappeared. This was a phenomenon where monsters, after being killed, would respawn after a certain amount of time. However, special entities like the two-headed dragon, Urus, did not. Jiwoo said it was his first time selling items, so he planned to repeat the process at least 100 times. And just like that, another explosion echoed through the valley. In the past, there was a very interesting lecture at Harvard University. The lecturer asked the audience if they all knew Bill Gates, the richest man in the world and founder of Microsoft. He explained that even if Bill Gates found $100 on the ground on his way to work, he wouldn't pick it up. The reason? It would be an economic loss for him. It takes 2 to 3 seconds to bend down and pick up the money, but in that time, he earns at least $150 per second. In other words, he would be losing about $200. However, back in the Valley of Ghosts, the situation was different. With all those items piled on the ground, forming a huge mountain, the time it took to farm 100 waves of monsters was about an hour, including the cooldown time. In total, the accumulated value of the items on the ground was about 15 billion won. According to the lecture, Bill Gates earns approximately 500 million won per hour. In a single moment, a young part-time worker from South Korea had exceeded the hourly income of the richest man in the world. The next day, in the city of Seoul, a saleswoman at a Gucci store was thanking Jiwoo. "Thank you for your purchase. Please come again." He walked out of the store wearing an outfit that cost over 3 million won, having also bought a new car and all sorts of luxury goods. People on the street stared at him in awe, with some commenting that it was the first time they had ever seen a Lamborghini. Jiwoo took off his 2 million won sunglasses and, as he drove away from the area, told himself it was time to show off. He floored it and crashed into a lamppost just moments later. Shocked and with a panicked expression, he yelled, "My 400 million won Lamborghini!" A few minutes later, however, he showed up with a new car, commenting, "Whatever, I can just buy another one." Meanwhile, at the Chrono Life building, Deokbai lit an expensive cigar, placing a hand on his head as he grumbled. He then told the employee to continue with the report, and the man agreed, summarizing that the company was ruined and they should flee. Deokbai asked if there was any way to unblock that bastard's transactions, but the employee stated that, at this point, it was impossible. The chairman continued to complain until his cell phone rang. He answered, already grumbling about his life. On the other end of the line, Jiwoo asked how the chairman was doing, commenting that he was on his way to spend more money and that he must know the feeling. Jiwoo taunted him further, saying he was thinking of doing a good deed and that perhaps the chairman was in need of something. Deokbai then screamed, blaming that bastard for everything. Jiwoo wondered aloud, ironically, if something had happened, then hung up. He wondered what he should buy next, since he'd already acquired all sorts of things. However, he felt that a highlight, a true high point in his life, was still missing. Suddenly, an idea struck him, and his eyes widened. He got ready to drive, thinking to himself that he couldn't believe he'd forgotten the most important thing. In an incredibly expensive building, Jiwoo let out a laugh like a cartoon villain. He announced that his penthouse was of the highest quality, super luxurious, and that everyone was welcome to his new home. Finally, he had achieved the great highlight of his life. But then, he remembered the first thing you're supposed to do when you move. He rang a neighbor's doorbell holding a rice cake in his hands. A female voice from inside asked who it was. Jiwoo replied that he was the new neighbor who had just moved in and brought some rice cakes as a gift. The young woman on the other side sounded confused and asked him to wait a moment, please. The door opened and Jiwoo, with a smile, began to say that he hoped they would get along, but he froze when he saw who it was. Apparently, his new apartment hadn't been the real highlight. Sarang was standing in her doorway. They both stared at each other, instantly remembering the game. This moment, this was the highlight of Jiwoo's day. Back in the game, in the Valley of Ghosts, a being approached, stopping before the entire army of Urus. The being simply extended its hand and, with chilling indifference, destroyed the entire army, turning it to blood. The 3 strongest warriors of Urus's army appeared, calling him an arrogant human as they advanced on the figure. But the man simply stated that the stupid bastards couldn't even recognize their own master. He unleashed 3 spikes from his back, channeling his power. In an instant, all of Urus's strongest warriors were pierced and annihilated. That monster began to absorb them like a leech, causing all the other monsters to panic. The being remained motionless, thinking that all must perish. Now the 3 strongest of Urus's army could no longer respawn. A system notification announced that he had absorbed the target's levels and stats. The data of Urus's strongest warriors had been completely deleted. The monster just stared at them with a cold expression, remembering the moment Urus lost his first head and gritting its teeth at the memory. When Urus entered his soul form, he had wondered where his other head could be. The being then revealed its identity. It is the lost head of Urus, which exists to ravage humanity. He is Urakan. Meanwhile, the most famous idol in the industry, Han Sarang, whose name in Chrono Life was Amor, appeared. Jiwoo was stunned to see her, thinking that this was his first time meeting Captain Amor in real life. Han Sarang thanked him, saying she would eat it all. Jiwoo looked at her, surprised, but soon realized it was the famous Han Sarang, whom he hadn't recognized. The door closed and Sarang headed inside. Her Nuna asked what that was, and the idol replied that it was a rice cake the neighbor had given her. She glanced aside, thinking she had seen him somewhere before. She then told her Nuna to eat, and her Nuna thanked her. The two hadn't recognized each other, as their appearances in the game and in real life are completely different. The Nuna brought it up, saying she should hurry and change out of her uniform. Sarang complained, saying it hadn't even been 30 minutes since she got home from school. Her Nuna replied that she could postpone it if she wanted, but she had wanted to get the filming over with so she could play the game. The idol remembered her arrangement to meet him, and announced she just needed to change her clothes quickly. The Nuna watched the scene with a smile, thinking that Sarang had obviously found someone special in the game. She wondered who the lucky guy could be, imagining he must be handsome to have stolen Sarang's heart. Inside the game, Jiwoo wondered where the monsters were. He wanted to know what had happened, and if the minions had fled, but Urus asserted that it was impossible. Monsters are programmed to operate in a specific area, making it impossible for them to flee or escape. It was as if they had vanished without a trace. Jiwoo glanced aside, thinking it didn't matter, as there were other places to hunt, and he could just go to another location to make money. Urus reminded him that he was supposed to meet that human, and he confirmed since it was almost time. The hunt was a bust, so it was better to leave soon. He complained that they were too far from the meeting point, but Urus looked back, sensing that something was off. That was strange. A familiar yet threatening spirit could be felt. Elsewhere in the mountains, Elrose, the giant level 190 snow serpent boss, was being absorbed by Urakan's power. Her stats and levels began to drain away. The dragon salivated, but he knew it wasn't enough. He still wasn't where he wanted to be. To destroy that human, he still had a long way to go. It was then that the goddess of life arrived, with her angelic wings. She questioned how he had gotten so far, commenting that it was to be expected of her dear child since he ate so much. Suddenly, Urakan's spike pierced her. The goddess was surprised. Urakan said it still wasn't enough, but that she looked delicious, and so he began to absorb her. The goddess of life begged him to wait, but she was soon completely consumed, collapsing to the ground, formless. However, the system notified him that the absorption had failed. The goddess of life reappeared, saying she would scold him later, because you can't give mommy a scare like that. She even joked, asking if he was going through puberty. Urakan wondered if it was some kind of hallucinatory magic, as he was certain he had swallowed her. The goddess, however, said that wasn't important. The dragon concluded that she wasn't food he could devour, and demanded to know her true nature, since they both had the same scent. The goddess of life then pointed toward a city in the distance, telling him there was plenty of food there. She told him to eat as much as he wanted. Urakan began to salivate. The goddess of life maintained her smile, watching the dragon become crazed with obsession. He spread his wings, as if in a trance, and declared that he was Urakan, and his purpose was to annihilate humanity. Then, he flew far away. He landed atop a building in the city. The players around them wondered what the creature was and what was happening. Without warning, one of the players was pierced in the chest by a spike and absorbed in front of his girlfriend. In a panic, she cried and screamed in agony. All the other players were struck by the spikes, absorbed en masse by the dragon. A sickly expression crossed his face as he salivated, absorbing everyone's levels and stats. The players had become his food. The starting village, a place where both beginners and veterans gathered, filled with new users and high-level rankers, was completely deleted by the dragon. At the Chrono Life Company, an employee burst through the door, announcing they had a problem. They were receiving a flood of user complaints, from calls to customer service to all sorts of reports and YouTube live streams. The support department was practically paralyzed. The team was checking the situation and asked them to wait. To be attacked by a monster and have your character deleted was crossing the line. Deokbai complained about the whole situation, sarcastically asking if Urakan had shown up yet, and if this wasn't fun. The employee asked how it could have happened. Deokbai ordered that from now on, they were to monitor only 2 characters, the first being Urakan. In the burning city, the dragon stood motionless. The goddess of life commented that he was incredible, and that she hadn't imagined he would eat everyone, turning the city into a ghost town in an instant. Urakan continued to salivate, saying it still wasn't enough and that she had to tell him where to find more food. The goddess replied that she didn't know about the next meal, but then her expression shifted into a smile. She said she knew of one in another direction, and that it would be a delicious meal for him to absorb. In a forest area at 7:34 p.m., Sarang trembled with rage, remembering what she had said. If he was late, she would take his life. She was sure she'd told that bastard. Looking to the side, she thought that little shit was taking too long, until she realized Urakan was right behind her. The girl was a level 24 fighter, while the lost head of Urus was level 999. In the city of players, Hawkeye walked, complaining. He was the supreme commander of the 5-guild alliance, and one of the top rankers in Chrono Life. With his unique and overwhelming charisma, he had appeared in interviews, on YouTube, in newspapers, and was a man without equal in the game. However, after Judgment Day, the World Union Guild was dissolved. Hawkeye, the former Supreme Commander, fell into ruin after taking all the blame and responsibility. He repeated to himself who he was and the title he held, for the World Guild had once been at his feet. He wondered if the others thought he would simply fall like this, when a sudden explosion shook the area. People started screaming that a monster had appeared in the central square. That village was supposed to be a safe zone. That day, Hawkeye witnessed something unbelievable, the sight of several players being simply deleted. He hid, watching the scene and wondering what the hell that was. This was really crossing the line. The goddess of life noticed him, but just kept a smile on her face. The scene of destruction in the village continued until the moment they both began to fly, moving far away from there. Hawkeye watched everything with the system screen open, thinking about the notice board. Suddenly he began to laugh, a laugh that bordered on madness. The monster in front of Sarang startled her. She thought, I don't think this guy is a player. Was there a monster like this on the Hill of Beginners? The goddess then appeared, saying, It's a pleasure to meet you, Captain Love. Sarang questioned her. Do you know Underpants? He's the only one who calls me that. She continued, annoyed. I almost hit him. Why did you give your character such a scary skin? Luna asked. Are you close to him? Sarang replied, For now, actually, I just felt like playing with him a bit, even though I don't like him that much. He just won't leave my shadow. The goddess of life's face darkened for a moment, but she quickly forced a smile. Earlier, while facing the Hallison Guild, Luna was already in a bad mood because of Jiwoo, who had spoken with Captain Love. You are truly very annoying, said the goddess. Sarang, confused, asked, What do you mean by that? Before she could react, she was pierced by spikes, lifted into the air by a blow from Urakan, as her HP bar dropped to 0. Luna declared coldly, Please, go to hell. You were overrated. Sarang fell to the ground, and from her body, only the scarf she wore remained. Urakan absorbed the player's stats and levels, commenting, Delicious. That was quite a meal. Luna replied, Of course. After all, she was a piece of a god. Urakan seemed to question the statement, but the goddess just walked over to the scarf on the ground. That's not important, she said. Don't worry about it. Stepping on the scarf that was on the ground, she asks if they should go eat more delicious food. However, Jiwoo interrupts her, wanting to know where the sickos were going. Both turned around, coming face to face with an angry face. The goddess breaks into into a smile, saying it's been a long time and asks how he is. Ji-woo, however, tells her to shut up. He warns her to get her filthy pig's foot off the scarf if she doesn't want to lose her life again. The goddess looks down at the scarf she was stepping on and moves away, saying she's sorry and that she did it by mistake. Ji-woo watches her coldly. He then turns to Urakan, calling him human with tentacles, and warns that the beating would start with him. Ji-woo raises his staff high. A blast of power stronger than any ever seen is unleashed. The dragon's face lights up for an instant before everything in its direction is completely obliterated. The energy blast pierces the planet's atmosphere and continues flying through the galaxy. When the smoke clears, Ji-woo is still standing. He says he'll let that woman escape just this once and that the cockroach should run along. Luna questions how a cockroach could be as beautiful as her and tells him to stop pretending to be strong, since he couldn't take her life anyway. She advises him to finish his job properly before worrying about her, as his enemy is still right in front of him. Ji-woo looks in the direction of the attack and sees Urakan flying towards him at full speed. Luna calls him my son as the dragon readies its claws and strikes him with a blast of power. The blow causes an immense explosion. Urus despairs and shouts for his Hyung-nim. However, Ji-woo remains standing, commenting that it surprised him. He questions what Urakan is and why he's fine even after taking his attack. Urus asks if he's okay, and the protagonist confirms, as his wounds regenerate in an instant. Urakan asks why he would be surprised, stating that he could simply dodge that kind of attack. He says the blow simply never reached him. Ji-woo glares at him coldly. Dodged it, huh? Then I'd better swing harder next time. Urus remarks that it was a nasty bluff, questioning if Ji-woo was saying the previous attack wasn't at full power. The protagonist confirms, explaining that all his attacks so far were just normal strikes. Saying this, he releases an immense energy, leaving Urakan completely terrified. Ji-woo releases energy from his chest, activating the novice skill, Swordsman's Spirit Master. Until now, he could only use one of his skills. He then addresses Urakan, calling him son of a cockroach. He warns him that, for the first time, he will use a skill. If he gets hit, he'll be gravely injured, so he'd better do his best to dodge. Ji-woo grips his stick with all his might and orders the system to activate the skill Continuous Cut. The unleashed blow flies out of the planet, heading towards Saturn. With every second the attack travels, memories of Sarang flood Ji-woo's mind, and he grows enraged by everything that has happened. The blow seems to completely erase Urakan's existence before continuing on its path and piercing through Saturn. The planet initially begins to dissipate the shockwaves, but it suddenly glows brightly and explodes, causing destruction on a planetary scale. And that was Continuous Cut, the most basic skill of a swordsman. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a live broadcast was about to begin. Hawkeye appears on the screen, introducing himself as the Supreme Commander of the World Union. The chat immediately calls him a loser and demands he shut down the broadcast, but paradoxically, the number of viewers only increases, with more people joining in just to threaten him. Streamer mode is a feature in the game Chrono Life that allows users to broadcast their gameplay. Although any player could use it, it was disabled during Doomsday to ensure the operation's success. Because of this, the identity of the person they were looking for had not yet been revealed to the public. Hawkeye announces that he'll get straight to the point. One person against 3 million players. Realistically, it shouldn't be possible. He claims to have seen the company's notice board, which denied it was a bug or a hacker, but he simply can't believe it. He accuses the game company of treating its users like dogs and pigs, insisting they should investigate the case, as the complaint board was a mess with reports of a monster that could delete characters. He calls on everyone who had their characters deleted to join his stream, as he is going to track down this monster. He promises he will expose everything today, revealing the truth behind that rotten game company. Suddenly he stops and changes his tone, asking everyone not to forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Back at the battle site, the smoke begins to clear. Ji-woo remains standing unharmed and lets out a sigh. He comments, surprised, that Urakan was incredible for having survived. Ji-woo can't believe he managed to avoid a fatal blow and wonders how he did it. Despite having survived, the monster was completely wounded. The being then formally introduces himself. He is Urakan, and his sole purpose is to annihilate humanity. He reveals himself as the strongest boss, the lost head of Urus. Urus confirms that he knew, saying the familiar presence he felt earlier wasn't just his imagination. He asks Hyung-nim to be careful, as that bastard could be the reason for the disappearance of the monsters in the Valley of Ghosts. Captain Love's death earlier must have also been his doing. As Jiwoo processes the information, Urakan watches the conversation from a distance, repeating that he will take his life before launching another attack with his claws. Jiwoo asks if he's serious, remembering that Love's character had been completely deleted. At that exact moment, Urakan attacks, but the protagonist blocks the blow by touching the monster's head with his staff and activating non-lethal attack. An immense explosion echoes through the area. Hawkeye runs toward the battle, shouting for everyone to stay alert as he gets closer for a better look. Jiwoo spins his staff and strikes Urakan's abdomen, once again using non-lethal attack and causing another massive explosion. Urakan spits blood, grunting in pain, but still tries to advance one more time. Jiwoo simply prepares another attack, this time using the burst attack version. Several blasts of energy strike the monster's body in succession as Jiwoo continues to strike without pausing for breath. A final, immense explosion erupts, and Urakan coughs up more blood. From a distance, Hawkeye watches everything from beneath a tree. The other players wonder who could be fighting in such a high-level battle, but some feel they've seen that man before. Hawkeye, however, is simply in shock. As the smoke clears, Jiwoo's identity is revealed. He was the man from the poster. Everyone is completely stunned. That was the guy who had caused doomsday. Hawkeye remembers how he was utterly defeated and everything that happened, thinking it was all that bastard's fault. He can't believe he's found his worst enemy at the worst possible time and place. Without hesitation, he aims his bow in Jiwoo's direction. The arrow flies toward the battle, but instead of hitting its target, it shatters a piece of Urakan's horn. The onlookers wonder what that was. Suddenly, someone in the chat announces they've recovered their character. Soon, other people start reporting the same thing. Hawkeye is in denial, thinking that should be impossible. The stolen souls were, in fact, returning to their owners, albeit with reduced levels and skill points. With his body covered in wounds, Urakan's level plummets to 723. Jiwoo wonders what is happening. At first, he was dodging the attacks with ease, but now he realizes the monster has gotten slower. Urus explains that the energy the bastard had absorbed was returning to its original owners. Meanwhile, at the company building, one of the team leaders states that he understands the situation. He explains that the player's data wasn't deleted, but rather transferred to Urakan's horns. Deokbai, surprised, questions how he, a developer, didn't know about this. The employee replies that he was the design team leader. Back in the fight, a smile spreads across Jiwoo's face. Is this for real? So, if I beat the hell out of this bastard, will Captain Amor return too? The mention of the name seems to startle Urakan. He grinds his teeth in rage and charges forward, screaming that Jiwoo is nothing but insignificant food. Jiwoo responds with a continuous attack, using the non-lethal version of his skill. The blows land squarely, dealing immense damage to the monster. The system notifies that another stolen soul has returned to its owner, and Urakan's levels have been reduced again. Now he was at level 389. On Hawkeye's livestream, the number of viewers just keeps increasing. People in the chat comment that he was the guy who caused doomsday, a player killer. However, now they were getting their characters back thanks to him. Hawkeye, who had been watching with his jaw dropped, closes his mouth. He lowers his bow, giving up on attacking the protagonist. In the penthouse where Sarang lives, she watches the stream on her phone, already in her performance outfit. The viewers celebrate and cheer for Jiwoo. Sarang watches the scene, also with her jaw dropped, and remembers when Jiwoo used to run after her, asking to be carried in the game. The girl reflects on how much he has changed. Back in the game, the smoke from the attack starts to clear. Urakan is kneeling on the ground, his body completely ravaged by the non-lethal strikes. His stats were now equivalent to those of a level 180 player. Jiwoo swiftly closes in. Urus remarks that all the energy in the bastard's body is gone, causing him to revert to his original form. I can tell, Jiwoo replies, wondering how he should end this. Urakan just drools, unable to move, and tries to babble his own name. Suddenly he launches a final spike, which impales the protagonist. It's a direct hit. Everyone watching the stream is completely shocked. Urus's jaw drops, while Urakan opens his mouth in a triumphant roar. Urakan screamed that he was a creature destined to annihilate humanity, as Jiwoo's levels were absorbed as if by a leech. Desperate, Urus tried to call out to his young Nim, screaming as the protagonist was torn in half. Urakan continued to absorb his target's level. What was left of Jiwoo fell to the ground like a twig, and the monster's horn began to grow back. He then burst into laughter, shouting that it was delicious, and that it was his first time having such a fine meal. His level reached 999, but Urakan declared that it wasn't enough. His hunger would never be sated, for he was Urakan the gluttonous. Urus approached what was left of his friend, kneeling beside him. He broke down in tears, calling out for his Hyungnim. Suddenly, the hidden skill healing factor was activated, and the damaged parts began to regenerate. Urakan felt an immense growth in his belly and began to suffer. His belly started to crack, forming a face that stretched out from the monster, turning to stare at him coldly. The face gave a smile that left Urakan completely terrified. The creature screamed in agony, while the protagonist just laughed at the situation. A piece of Deokbei's cigar fell to the ground. Everyone wondered what that disgusting thing was. From above, Luna watched everything, completely astonished. Jiwoo continued his chilling laughter, saying that this was quite fun, and that Urakan looked like an earthworm. Urus questioned if it was really him, and the protagonist confirmed it. Urakan gritted his teeth in anger, screaming that Jiwoo was the child who existed only to annihilate humanity, and once again calling himself Urakan the Gluttonous. But his shouting suddenly stopped. Jiwoo began to absorb his belly, using the matter to form his own body. His form began to reshape itself, startling Urus. Urakan could only groan in pain as he was being sucked in. Jiwoo stepped onto the ground, completely reformed. The enhanced skill healing factor recovery ensured that all damage taken was instantly recovered. With the activation of the healing factor, all absorbed cells are restored to their original owner. Jiwoo wondered what the point of that was, since most of his own cells had fused with Urakan, making Jiwoo part of the monster's body and reducing him to a mere organ. However, the process reversed. Urakan was also absorbed by the healing factor, and Jiwoo simply expelled him with a burp. As a result, a hidden skill is acquired, Gluttony, which allows the user to absorb a target's level and stats by eating them. Luna asked if it was over. She commented that it wasn't what she expected, but it was quite fun to watch. Jiwoo noted that she seemed happy, even after he had taken her son's life. The girl explained that he was evil, and that it was all metaphorical, as she hadn't actually given birth to him. For his information, she was 21 years old, the same age as him. Surprised, Jiwoo questioned how she knew that. Ignoring the question, Luna simply summoned her scepter, moving it to the side. After giving Jiwoo one last smile, she opened a dimensional portal, asking rhetorically, "Who knows?" Immense claws pierced through the portal, revealing the hand of an absurd creature. Jiwoo was completely shocked. Luna walked to the top of that hand and said her goodbyes, saying she would see him around and calling him for the last time, Mr. Loser. Meanwhile, at the company, Deokbei's cigar fell from his mouth. He ordered them to handle the situation by posting a notice about a reward event and to continue monitoring what he had requested earlier. Remarking on how entertaining the situation with Urakan was, he gave a new directive. From now on, they were to focus their monitoring on just two people. One of them, formerly Urakan, and the other, Luna. Back in the old starting village, players raised their hands high, glorifying Jiwoo's deeds and shouting that he was a hero. Some people played trumpets, calling for all residents of the starting villages to hail their game's hero. Jiwoo put a hand to his head, being dramatic. He wondered who had revealed his secret and his strength, ruining any plan to hide his power. Hawkeye's live stream peaked at 235,000 viewers, and clips of the event spread across various communities, like YouTube. Amid the praise, an elf shouted for them to stop talking nonsense, as that bastard would never be a hero. He accused him of being a mass murderer who had taken the lives of 3 million players in a short time, and that praising the most wanted criminal was insane. Hawkeye, however, interrupted him, questioning if taking players' lives wasn't the same as deleting characters and telling him to stop talking nonsense. With just one broadcast, Hawkeye became a popular streamer, being, in fact, the one who benefited most from the whole incident. Someone suggested that since he seemed to work alone, without a guild, he should join the Justice Guild. The other people there also asked the hero to join their guilds, promising that he would be treated very well if he joined them. Jiwoo got scared by all the attention and fled from the crowd that insisted he join them. Urus joked, saying that Hyungnim had become quite famous and that he should have stopped hiding his power much sooner. Jiwoo, annoyed, told him to shut up. Suddenly, he bumped his head on a golden statue. He stepped back, wanting to know what the hell that was, and came face to face with a full-body statue of himself. Both Urus and Jiwoo had utterly terrified expressions. He asked what that was, pleading for it not to be him, but Urus just confirmed that it was Hyungnim. Wang appeared behind him and asked if he liked the statue. He emerged with his guild, all of them wearing only underwear and a cloak. The man said it was worth spending a fortune to make this tribute. He really enjoyed Jiwoo's performance, and just as he thought, he truly is that guy. Wang then asked if he wasn't the one who caused the doomsday, explaining that after that day he was so impressed that he had the statue built. Jiwoo denied it, confused by his reaction. Besides, he wanted to know why everyone was in their underwear. The chairman explained explained that they had used everything they had to build the statue, and that the thing had cost over 20 billion. Just then, the townspeople shouted that they had found the hero. Jiwoo started running again and told the old man not to follow him. Meanwhile, in Han Sarang's penthouse, she sat on her bed, head bowed, reflecting on everything that had happened. It should all be obvious to her now, the monsters disappearing the moment she opened her eyes, and the bear rabbit that was crushed with a single blow. Even her gauntlets, which had been stolen by the Hallison Guild. He must have recovered them and given them to her after finding the guild. She wondered why he did it, why he pretended to be weak. Why did he deceive her? With a look of dread, she remembered when her teddy bear was destroyed on the floor. She was just a child in front of her father, crying in fear, scared of everything. The girl had a breakdown, remembering how he had deceived her as she tried to take off her glasses. In the end, she put them back on her face and continued to tremble, sitting on the bed. Later, in the game city, Jiwoo wore a tired expression. He commented that the people had finally calmed down and that this must be the life of a famous person. Urus, however, warned him that people were still staring at him. Jiwoo then wondered if it felt like they were forgetting something. He felt he had forgotten something important, but was surprised that he couldn't remember what it was. Han Sarang was now standing in front of him. Jiwoo called out to her, asking if she had finally reappeared. He remarked that it was no wonder he'd felt something was missing. He figured it was because she wasn't around. The people around them wondered who this girl the hero was calling out to was. No one was sure, as it was the first time they had seen her, but somehow she looked familiar. Jiwoo remembered the scarf. "I got this for you," he said, wrapping it around the girl's neck. He explained that he got it after taking the Urikan's life, but quickly corrected himself, saying he had picked it up along the way, that he'd found it on the ground. This, however, only irritated Han Sarang even more. She trembled with rage. "Don't make me laugh," she said. "That's not true. Why are you lying?" "What do you mean?" Jiwoo asked. "I don't know how to lie." Han Sarang trembled once more, this time with anxiety, and gritted her teeth. "Underpants!" she called him. "Weren't you the guy who delivered rice cakes to my house?" Jiwoo was confused, wondering what she was talking about, but then he realized what had happened. Remembering the moment he'd delivered the rice cake to her, he was in complete shock. "It can't be," he murmured. "Captain Love was Han Sarang." The girl then confirmed it, as the audience watched the drama unfold. "That's my identity in the real world, outside the game." Han Sarang's story was that of a girl who simply loved to sing. "Are you crazy?" her Nuna questioned. "You can't just reveal your identity in front of so many people. Do you have shit for brains?" She was already the #1 trending topic online, and it was a total frenzy, with journalists clamoring for interviews. On top of that, you customized your character to look exactly like you. You should have thought of that before you started playing. Customization is a feature in the game used to alter a character's appearance, but in virtual reality, the law requires players to log in with their real-life looks. The Nuna yelled that she should have at least changed her hairstyle, and that it was a miracle her identity hadn't been exposed until now. "And what's the big deal?" Han Sarang retorted. "I wasn't even trying to hide it. Is it a sin to play a game? Why should I have to hide my identity? I play to have fun, so I shouldn't have to care what other people think. It's because I'm afraid your real personality will be exposed. Have you forgotten you've been putting on an act for the entire nation?" said the Nuna. This only infuriated Han Sarang more. "I never wanted to pretend in the first place," she yelled. "You're the one who forced me to do it. I told you from the very beginning I didn't want to lie because I hate deceiving my fans." Then, she slammed her bedroom door shut. The Nuna just grumbled that she was such a stubborn girl. Han Sarang grabbed the virtual reality headset and quickly put it on. The system activated the device and scanned her iris. The trembling girl slowly began to calm down. The system announced that the authentication was complete, connecting to Chrono Life, in the past, at a school playground. Han Sarang hummed a tune about who drinks from the mountain spring. At dawn, a rabbit rubbed its eyes awake, but instead of washing its face, all it did was drink. Han Sarang discovered her talent for music at a young age, and surprisingly debuted in the industry when she was only 5. Genius, prodigy, a heaven-sent singer, or even a reincarnation. That's what they called her. Her debut was more glorious than anyone else's. However, a tragedy struck, as if it had been waiting for the right moment. Her flower, meant to bloom gloriously, was trampled by filthy corporate adults, and the very people who should have protected her the most were her own parents. Of course, the reason was money. It was an all-too-common problem seen throughout the entertainment industry, a tragedy that ruined a young child's life, as if she were a tragic character in some cheap drama. Just like that, Han Sarang was cruelly overworked. Various music programs, interviews, a variety of shows, and countless commercial shoots demanded her time. The reason she could handle such a harsh schedule, one that even an adult couldn't endure, was ironically because of her parents, who would always ask what the problem was, saying she can do better than this. even while crying and fearful, Han Sarang would force an anxious smile onto her face. However, the child's small body quickly reached its limit. On stage, during the year-end special broadcast that was pulling in the highest ratings of all time, she was preparing for a spectacular final performance. Under the extreme pressure, at the very end of the show, the girl collapsed, vomiting on the stage floor as the horrified audience watched. The girl began to cough frantically, calling out for her parents in fear, but they didn't respond. Instead, they covered their faces, overcome with anger. Seeing their reaction, the already ill girl fell into an even greater panic. And just like that, the child was left with a scar she would never forget. Sitting in a verdant field, Han Sarang reflected on her life as she gazed at the landscape. She remembered the protagonist putting the scarf around her neck and instinctively clutched it. Then, Jiwoo found her, saying he'd finally located her. The girl spun around, startled. The protagonist explained that a gut feeling had led him there and asked why she had suddenly run off, admitting he'd been worried. In response, Han Sarang simply told him to get lost. Jiwoo was completely confused by her reaction. He asked what was wrong, and Urus commented that she must be angry. The Hyungnim didn't understand that she was furious because he had deceived her by hiding his power. Jiwoo asked what he should do now, and Urus advised him to apologize, since lying to her had been wrong. The protagonist starts to cough a little, calls for the girl, and apologizes. He explains that he never meant to deceive her, and had planned to tell her the truth eventually, but the right moment never seemed to come. Han Sarang clutches the scarf in her hands, stands up, and asks if he really thinks a simple apology will fix everything, especially after he lied so easily. Jiwoo asks what she means by that, but his confusion turns to panic as a griffin swoops down from the sky and seizes her. The girl was in danger. Jiwoo screams her name in desperation as he watches the creature take flight. Riding the griffin, a figure asks if he grabbed her too forcefully, saying he didn't want her to pass out. Urus is utterly shocked, immediately recognizing the man. Jiwoo yells, asking who the bastard is and demanding he come back. The man ironically apologizes to the Mr. Hero, explaining that certain people wish to meet Miss Han Sarang, and so he'll be borrowing her. The protagonist curses at him as he draws his staff. Urus shouts, warning his Hyungnim not to attack recklessly, as the man is extremely powerful. Ignoring the warning, Jiwoo unleashes an upward strike, releasing a powerful blast of energy that surges toward the man on the griffin. However, the kidnapper merely sighs and activates his ability. 8 sights and 8 mirrors. Using the 5th sight reflection, he turns the protagonist's own attack back against him. Jiwoo was still in his attack stance when his own blast came hurtling back at him, leaving him completely stunned. The energy hits him head on. The explosion is so powerful that the shockwave devastates the landscape and extends beyond the atmosphere. Everything to Jiwoo's right is annihilated, including his own arm. Urus screams for his Hyungnim, desperately asking if he's all right. The protagonist had just sustained a critical injury, and his healing factor activates immediately. A new arm grows in its place. Jiwoo looks up, filled with rage. Urus asks if he realizes now that this person is no ordinary human. The man's name was Habayak, and he is in existence just like Urus. Jiwoo questions if in that case he shouldn't be a weakling. However, Habayak's mirror shatters. He is completely surprised by this, but soon a smile spreads across his face as he says that Jiwoo is truly incredible, the first to break his defense since that person. However, he declares that a mere human does not deserve to possess the fragment of a god. In a hidden tower in the western forest, Han Sarang wakes up and quickly backs away, demanding to know what the hell was going on, who he was, where she was, and why she'd been brought here. Habayak tells her to calm down, assuring her that he means no harm and that there are people who wish to meet with Miss Han Sarang. The girl asks who that could be, but 2 people approach. Han Sarang is completely shocked, recoiling by pure reflex with a frightened expression on her face. She recognizes who they are, her father and mother. She remembers the events on stage, how her parents had simply hidden their faces. After that damn day, Han Sarang decided to retire from her singing career. However, there was someone who never gave up on her. Her mother slaps her across the face. These were her parents. They had denied her retirement and forced her back onto the stage. Her mother would ask if she didn't understand they were doing it all out of love. So, for many years, the girl lived her life unable to retire. But when their income was completely cut off, during the incident with her father that left Sarang traumatized, they had already crossed every line. Those people didn't deserve to be called parents. They sold the only daughter they had. It was a miracle that Han Sarang managed to flee, and only because of that did she escape. The The only place the little girl managed to reach was the police station. Thus, Han Sarang was finally freed from her years in hell. The court issued a restraining order against her parents, who tried to appeal, but of course it failed. Thanks to the protection of the law, she was completely free from them. However, after everything that had happened, Han Sarang was already mentally broken. The girl carried an extreme trauma related to lies. Since then, she never left her room, and her only escape at the time was online games. Spending her time alone in the dark room, her eyesight deteriorated rapidly, and she had to start wearing glasses. Because of the memory of those days, she still gets anxious in real life if she takes off her glasses. The day she stepped out into the world once more will be told a little later. Back in the present, Han Sarang is with her parents. She trembles with pure anxiety, asking about the restraining order. They reply that they entered the game after seeing an article saying she played Chrono Life. They say it still would have been difficult to find her on their own, but fortunately, someone helped them this time. Habaek simply says his goodbyes, telling them he'll step out for a bit so they can talk freely, and immediately disappears from the spot. Sarang's mother says she's grown up so much. They had only seen her on TV, but it was so good to see her, even if it was in virtual reality. She laments how cruel the world is for using the law to separate parents from their daughter. Han Sarang begins to have a breakdown, grinding her teeth in anguish. Then she asks what they want and says that if it's nothing, she can just log out. Her mother shouts that they are very sorry. She says they've wanted to apologize for some time and that they were too harsh that day. She asks if Sarang could forgive them, if possible, because they want to have a happy life with her once again, like in the old days. Meanwhile, Habaek is walking outside the tower. His griffin suddenly stands up. Jiwoo was standing right behind him. Habaek says that place was kept secret, but he supposes Urus guided him there. He starts to explain, but Jiwoo tells him to shut up. Jiwoo states that he will fight again, and that even if he wins, he'll only be relieved after getting his just revenge. Habaek sighs, snaps his fingers, and says there's nothing to be done. His griffin begins to roar and then flies at the two of them. Jiwoo asks if the bird will be the first. Jiwoo is surprised, as there was now not one, but two griffins. He rubs his eyes, completely shocked by the number of multiplying birds, and wonders if this was some kind of copy pasta. Habaek uses his fourth vision, called photocopy, and tens of thousands of griffins advance on Jiwoo. What the hell is this? He wonders, as he swings his staff, causing an explosion that obliterates everything in its path.
However, the debris hangs suspended in the air, and suddenly, more griffins begin to emerge from it. Jiwoo asks who that guy is, and Urus explains that it's photocopy, the fourth ability of Habaek's mirror. He warns that Hyungnim must be careful, as the mirror's complete ability is called 8 Visions. Jiwoo says it's the first time he's heard of it.
Urus explains that there are 8 mirrors, and each level, from the first to the 8th vision, has a different effect. For example, the one he used before was Reflection, which reflects all physical and magical attacks. Jiwoo complains that it's too overpowered and that they should balance the game. Urus looks at him, finding it somewhat absurd to hear him talk about balancing. In truth, it didn't matter as the company never intended to balance things. Habaek isn't a user, but a boss that needs to be defeated. Meanwhile, Habaek just stares at him in silence. Jiwoo sarcastically remarks that the game is funny, with a boss walking around pretending to be human. He wonders what kind of animal came up with that idea, but he's interrupted by a griffin attacking him from behind. Caught by surprise, Jiwoo spits blood. Immediately, the other griffins shoot fireballs, launching them all at the protagonist. Despite the powerful attacks, Jiwoo remains standing, complaining that they scared him for a moment. Then he rises with his staff in hand and uses his skill, Continuous Cut. The griffins in front of him begin to dissipate. Habaek, however, just sighs once more. He says it's useless, no matter how many Jiwoo defeats, since he can copy as many as he wants with photocopy. To prove his point, other griffins appear in place of the old ones, growling at the protagonist. Jiwoo asks if he's being serious and realizes that to win, he also needs to shatter that mirror. Habaek, in turn, just maintains his evil smile. Jiwoo uses Continuous Cut once more, eliminating all the creatures. However, as soon as the griffins are reborn, he unleashes another barrage of continuous cuts. After repeating this action a dozen times, planet Earth begins to emanate many beams of light and tremble with each continuous cut launched. Finally, the mirror cracks a little. Habaek is completely surprised by this, wondering who this guy was. Jiwoo simply pointed the stick at him, asking if it was finally cracking. He said he'd heard Habaek was just like Urus, which meant he was a weakling. Habaek replied that he wasn't weak, but that Jiwoo was the abnormal one, and he hadn't expected such power. Jiwoo told him to wipe that smile off his face, as it reminded him of a cockroach. Then, he demanded an answer if he didn't want to go to hell, asking why he had kidnapped Captain Amor and what he meant by piece of a god. Habaek said he wasn't sure if he should answer. Jiwoo questioned if he'd rather lose his life and warned him to stay put. Habaek commented that the mirror was almost broken, but he thought he could use it one more time. Something approached from behind them. Jiwoo wondered if it was another one of those bird heads, but was surprised to see who it was. A perfect copy of himself stood before him, with his stick perfectly replicated, right down to his underwear. Jiwoo stared, dumbfounded, wondering if he was his own opponent. The duplicate copied its target, but as a mirror image. That copy raised its stick and used reverse continuous cut. The barrage of slashes rushed toward him. Jiwoo simply wore a look of grim acceptance and let the attack hit him. His HP began to drop until it reached 0. With that, everything in the area exploded. Habaek watched the fight from a distance, commenting that it was incredible. If he had known, he would have just copied Jiwoo instead of the griffin. Urus called out to Habaek, demanding to know his purpose. Habaek greeted the dragon, saying it had been a while, and apologized for not doing so sooner, as he had been busy. He commented that Urus looked much cuter than before. Urus told him to stop changing the subject, and asked what he wanted, appearing in front of the Hyungnim. He wanted to know if that person had sent him. Habaek called Urus by name and asked if he could pinch his cheeks just once, to which the dragon called him a piece of shit. Suddenly, something on the ground began to grow. The pieces of flesh writhed rapidly, taking on a sinister form. Habaek questioned what it was, while Urus wondered if everything was starting all over again. The healing factor activated, and Jiwoo's health was fully restored. He walked forward, fully recovered, but his body still twitched like a character from a horror movie. Suddenly, the newly formed figure called out to Habaek, startling the villain. Jiwoo's copy appeared behind him. Jiwoo turned and said, "There you are, you damn imposter!" The copy just stared at him in silence. Urus commented that the clone looked even more like a fake than the original, but Jiwoo told the dragon to shut up. The copy grips his staff tightly and unleashes a downward slash against the protagonist. The blast of energy flies at high speed. Jiwoo just sighs at the attack, and returning to his original form, also wields his staff, countering with an upward slash. The two powers collide violently. Everyone watching the fight was stunned. It was as if two opposing forces were colliding on the planet. As the smoke begins to clear, the two Jiwoos charge at each other, gritting their teeth and screaming in unison. Their powers clash, along with their staffs, which move at a blinding speed. The shockwaves from the blows reverberate throughout the area. The protagonist focuses all his strength into his attacks, while his copy does the exact same. Both use their skills simultaneously, unleashing the continuous slash once more. The attacks explode, devastating the western forest, as their blue and red auras of power collapse into each other. Jiwoo employs immense force, reliving the same sensation as before, and the clone also unleashes his full power. With the final blow, the protagonist lets out a furious roar, and their attacks collide, exploding everything once more. Both Jiwoo and the copy are surprised by the result. As their power explodes a chunk of the earth, Habaek and Urus cover their faces. The water god says that since they both hit each other's heads, the blow must have destroyed them both, but Urus just calls out for his Hyungnim. The smoke from the site begins to clear, revealing both the copy and the protagonist writhing on the ground as shapeless masses, using their healing factor to become human again. Habaek comments that while they aren't insane, it seems this is the only way they can recover. Both return to their normal forms and charge towards each other, their forces colliding once more. The blue and red explosion engulfs the mountain, as their spectators continue to watch from a distance. Urus says it was about time Habaek answered why he was hindering Hyungnim, and why he kidnapped Captain Love. Habaek keeps a smile on his face, saying that, as expected, Urus knows nothing and tells him to pay attention to the others. He continues, stating that not even that person can act carelessly around him, the strongest being in chrono life. This was the proud Urus. Habaek then says he would also like to ask something. Why was Urus, who never had any interest in anything in the world, accompanying a mere human? Why? Urus repeats, wondering if Habaek still hadn't realized. His colleague says that in any case, Urus has misunderstood several things, and that he can rest assured, as he wants nothing to do with Mr. Hero. The objective was only the peace of God. Urus questions if he was talking about Captain Love. Habaek starts laughing, asking what he was talking about, since a human would never have such value. Han Sarang was merely the owner of the peace of God. Meanwhile, facing her parents in the hidden tower, Han Sarang's mother apologizes. She says she is very sorry and hopes her daughter can accept, until she notices that the girl had nothing in her hands. She falls silent for a few seconds and then suddenly grabs her daughter's hand. "My beautiful daughter," Han Sarang, where are the gauntlets of silence? Back on the mountain, Urus asks, they are the peace of God, and they only cost 10 million? Habaek replies that the price isn't important, and that soon the item will be accessible to normal players. The items in Chrono Life were divided into several ranks. First, there were the lowly normal rank items. Second, came the rare rank. After that came the unique rank, and finally the Newman rank. Urus had also heard that a transcendent rank existed, but he had never seen one in real life, and he remembers that they were all in Jiwoo's possession. Habaek says that regardless of strength or rarity, the peace of God is very special, although the transcendent rank is an exception, especially for the gods of this world. Meanwhile, Luna was watching the fight from afar. She comments that Mr. Habaek really spilled all the secrets, and that a man who can't keep his mouth shut wasn't attractive at all, asking if that wasn't true. Beside her, a god eats a sandwich and reveals that this was nothing new. Everyone already knew, since Luna herself had also been collecting pieces of God since she arrived at the Halasan Guild that night. That thing referred to the gauntlets of silence. Luna says that, as expected, he had known all along. The god asks if she thought Urakan could absorb the peace of God. The goddess of life agrees and says she pretended to be calm, but the result was different from what she was thinking. Suddenly, an even larger explosion erupts. Jiwoo and his clone's powers collide. Jiwoo begins to feel the effects of fatigue, but his clone does not. Then, with a precise strike, the clone attacks. Jiwoo quickly realizes what's about to happen, but he's struck by a slash across his chest and thrown far away. Urus calls out for his Hyungnim. Habaek explains that their stats and control are identical, but there was a clear, fatal difference: the difference between a user and a bot. Unlike the hero, the copy won't make any mistakes due to fatigue management. Thus, the tide of battle will likely turn. Urus flies toward his Hyungnim. Habaek just sighs at the sight. Jiwoo's body dissolves into goo on the ground, but suddenly reforms, a wound on his chest. Urus quickly reaches his side. Jiwoo activates his healing factor, and his body begins to mend, even clearing the blood from his mouth. He shouts that this was damn fun. Urus and Habaek are surprised by his reaction. Jiwoo explains that it's been boring all this time, since he could take everyone down with a single blow. He says he doesn't want to kill that phony, just keep playing. Urus questions what he means, as he was in a very dangerous situation. The clone charges at him, and Jiwoo laughs at the idea that he's in danger. He stands still before the attacks, commenting that there are two ways to finish this bastard. From Urus to the gods, everyone is surprised by this revelation. The two sticks collide, causing a huge wave of smoke and an explosion that destroys another part of the land. Urus tries to cover his face, while Luna and the god just withstand the impact. Suddenly, the smoke dissipates. Habaek comments that Jiwoo had mentioned two ways to finish him, and was curious to know which method he would use. Luna, eating a piece of her sandwich, says he was just bluffing. Compared to the other bosses in Chrono Life, Habaek was on another level, and his 8 Visions ability was simply broken. He wasn't a boss to be faced alone, and she doubts Jiwoo can defeat him. Jiwoo then reveals that the first method was to simply destroy the planet. Luna and the god become completely apprehensive, but the protagonist explains that if he destroyed the planet and ended the game like last time, Captain Love would return to the starting village, and this phony would disappear. However, he's not really in the mood for that and prefers to try something new. The two gods are slightly relieved. Meanwhile, Deokbae bites his nails, begging for him to get on with the second method, clearly the most anxious about the situation. Back in the hidden tower, the mother asks her daughter where the gauntlets of silence are, asking her to be honest and promising she won't get mad. The father intervenes, saying Habaek would give them a lot of money if they got the item. He claims they aren't asking for much, and that for bringing her into the world, she owed them this. Han Sarang replies that she doesn't know either, as she lost them a while ago. Her father steps closer, questioning if she hid them. Han Sarang denies it, insisting that's not what happened, but he brutally strikes her across the face. Her father calls her an ungrateful brat, shouting that they tried to endure it when she ran away. He says she was a waste of money, and must have forgotten who did everything for her, demanding to know where his money is. Back at the battle, a magic circle forms beneath Jiwoo. Urus wonders what it is, questioning if it's a new skill from the rookie master. Habaek also looks surprised, but the dragon seems to recognize that violet spirit. Jiwoo activates the ability he absorbed from Urakan, and a tentacle emerges from his body. That was gluttony, emerging from his mouth. As Urus wondered if they could escape that place, the tentacle pierced the clone's back and began to absorb its body. Habaek questioned, "Was this your plan? Did you think my clones couldn't copy the gluttony skill?" Immediately, another tentacle emerged from the clone's mouth, striking Jiwoo in the chest. Both began to absorb each other. Habaek explained that the opponent was a reflection that mirrored everything. As such, it also possessed the gluttony skill, in addition to the healing factor and the battery. Jiwoo's strategy had failed. He really should have tried the first method. Jiwoo, however, ordered, "Equip reserve battery." Habaek wondered what that was, but before he could understand, he was struck by a stinger in the chest. Jiwoo explained that his second second attack was aimed at injuring the main body. The tentacle began to absorb Habaek, who realized too late. The attempt to absorb the clone had been a feint from the very beginning. As his body began to disfigure, the clone started to falter, disappearing shortly after. Jiwoo said, "I knew it. If the main body suffers a fatal wound, the clone disappears. It was fun fighting you, you bastard, but now, goodbye?" Habaek continued to be absorbed relentlessly, but he began to resist, managing to sever the tentacle. Jiwoo was surprised by the reaction. The mirror bled along with Habaek. He gripped the artifact tightly, shouting, "You bastard! I didn't know I'd be cornered like this. It's a shame, but I have no choice but to give up the peace of God, the gauntlets of silence." The god was surprised, questioning if the peace of God hadn't already been absorbed by Uricon, and if Habaek was unaware. Luna denied it, admitting she hadn't told him. Habaek flew high into the air, announcing he would retreat for now. Jiwoo retracted his tentacle and taunted, "How dare you leave? You're just a loser giving yourself permission to flee." "You're right," Habaek agreed. "The loser should run with his tail between his legs." With that, he threw the mirror toward Jiwoo, who acquired the artifact imbued with one of the 8 visions. Jiwoo questioned the gesture, and Urus was surprised that Habaek had given him the item. Habaek told him to accept it, considering it a reward for defeating the raid. He explained that it wasn't a formal reward, but something he would have given him anyway for being spared. Jiwoo asked why he would do that, since he could get better items by taking his life. Habaek agreed, but explained that he needed to be alive for the mirror to work, which was why it was better to let him live. With that, he bid farewell and left. Ownership of Habaek's mirror was transferred, and Jiwoo was now its new owner. He, however, just shrugged, thinking it didn't matter. His main objective in the first place had been Captain Love, not the man with the mirror. Inside the hidden tower, in the same room as before, Han Sarang's father continued to assault her. He yelled that she was an ungrateful brat and had no idea of the suffering they had gone through because of her. He demanded that she obediently listen to her parents, calling her rebellious, and asked if she had forgotten who brought her into this world. The girl fell to the floor, keeping her head bowed. The old man sighed, tired, but then a smile spread across his face. "That's right," he said. "Now that it's come to this, we no longer need the gauntlets of silence. From now on, we can just take the money from him." Han Sarang thought she couldn't take it anymore. Her mother approached and said this was a game and that the court's protective order didn't work here. She couldn't even run away. As Han Sarang clenched her fists, her mother commented that their family would be together forever. The girl, however, simply pleaded in her thoughts for someone to come and free her from this hell. "Are you guys idiots?" Jiwoo's voice interrupted the scene. "She can just stop playing the game." Everyone turned in his direction. The mother questioned who he was and how he dared to interrupt them. "Underpants guy," Han Sarang thought, recognizing him. The father recognized him too. "It's the guy from the video, that useless bastard who was touching Sarang," he yelled, but was struck before he could finish the sentence. Jiwoo had used his skill to attack without taking a life. "Even if I'm rude, I'm at least polite to my elders," he said. "Of course, selfish old geezers like you are an exception." Urus, watching, wondered if Jiwoo hadn't been just as informal with the Ajusis from the Halasan Guild. "We're Sarang's parents!" the father shouted, recovering. "Bullshit," Jiwoo retorted. "In what world do parents beat their children and extort money from them?" The mother intervened. "Ask Sarang herself. We really are her parents." Jiwoo sighed in frustration. "I hate it when people bring reality into the game. There's no point in playing video games if it's going to be like this." The mother said that's why kids who play video games these days are like this. Jiwoo turns to Captain Love. "Why are you just sitting there after taking a beating like that?" The girl turns to him. "Don't hold back. Go all out. You have the highest level here." Sarang is surprised by his words. "They really are my parents." How disgusting. Being realistic in a game. "That's pathetic," Jiwoo says. "Just by looking at them, I can already tell what kind of family you have. But if you're going to be a loser in here too and run away like you do in real life, then why are you even playing?" Sarang grinds her teeth. "What do you know, you little brat? You don't know anything," she shouts, crying. "I've been enduring it all this time." The mother lunges forward to slap her. "What do you mean? Don't you know we're the ones who've been enduring it? Whether it's in reality or in the game, we're still your parents." Sarang grinds her teeth once more. Jiwoo comments in disbelief that her mother is truly heartless for trying to strike her again. "Goodbye. Captain Love is very strong. Even without a weapon, with her bare hands, her punches will hurt a lot." Encouraged, Sarang runs toward her mother, who backs away, frightened and grinding her teeth. Bad memories from her childhood flood the girl's mind. Sarang charges forward with a clenched fist, crying, and lands a direct hit on her mother's face, sending her flying from the impact. Sometime later, Sarang appears in an interview about her, a famous idol, being a player of the game. "Yes, that's me. I've been enjoying Chrono Life a lot all this time." The interviewer comments that the game is quite realistic and asks if she doesn't mind taking the life of even a rabbit. Of course I can pummel the monsters. It's a great stress reliever, she replies. The idol had completely overcome her trauma and now lives comfortably. Her anxiety disappeared, and she doesn't even need to wear glasses anymore. The interviewer observes, that's the opposite of how you normally are. The opposite, Hansarang repeats. Maybe the way I am in the game is who I really am. The audience blushes at her declaration. Sarang continues, but who cares about things like that? Who I really am. If you're looking for reality in a game, then there's no reason to play. In his house, Jiwoo watches the interview on TV. Jiwoo sighed, wondering if it was because of her cool and honest answer that she now had so many more fans all supporting her. He supported her as a fan too. The media's narrative was perfect. The idol Han Sarang, who overcame her trauma, had left the world of gaming to live happily in reality. Upon entering Chrono Life, however, the reality was different. Sarang shouted, "That damn brat is late again. He has a habit of doing this. Does he really want to go to hell?" Jiwoo defended himself, saying he came as soon as he watched the interview and that she was the one who should be at the broadcast station. "The interview was pre-recorded," she retorted. In truth, the idol hadn't stopped playing after overcoming her trauma. On the contrary, she was now logging in more frequently, and from what he'd heard, had even reduced her professional schedule. Sarang hurried him, saying they didn't have time and had to go. Jiwoo, confused, asked where. "Are you going to get hung up on details?" she scolded him. "It seems you've forgotten and still haven't accepted my apology." "It's fine," Jiwoo said, starting to follow her. A victorious smile spread across Sarang's face. "I'll forgive you this time, since you'll be the one carrying me." The protagonist questioned what she meant by that, but then he quickly remembered the past, when he had asked her to carry him. Back then, Sarang had said she was a newbie and didn't know anything. Now she turned, approached him and asked, "Please carry me, Master Jiwoo." Chrono Life was the #1 virtual reality game in the world. Due to its large number of players, there were many guilds. Among them all, the most powerful were nicknamed the world's 5 great guilds. Each possessed its own strength and peculiarities, which made them worthy of their reputation. However, one guild took a completely different path from the others. They possessed a formidable intelligence network, surpassing even the Global Information Guild, and their long-range operations covered the entire continent. All members of this guild belonged to the rogue class. It was the Robin Hood Guild, one of the 5 greats, an organization worthy of praise completely annihilated in just one night. The guild leader stared at the destruction for a few seconds, then turned and leaped towards the moon. He landed with an acrobatic flip, using the mountainside as a springboard for another jump. Suddenly, another man appeared behind him and asked, Well, do we still have a little rat alive?" The guild leader perceived the threat and reacted with a piercing slash that split the man in two. However, what seemed to be a body dissolved, revealing it was just an illusion. The man's voice echoed, saying he was better than the rest of them, before his presence vanished completely. The guild leader was confused, not understanding what had happened, as the impact of the blow felt strange. Suddenly, he was struck from behind. The attacker said that even so, he was still just around their level. From the impact, the guild leader spat blood and questioned who he was and why he was doing this. The man replied that it was obvious, as a mask materialized on his face, revealing he was also from the guild. Then, he added that the reason was simply because it was fun. On another day, near a forest, a carriage traveled down a road, pulled by a large cat. The coachman announced they were almost there and would soon reach the Rocky Mountain dungeon. Inside the carriage, Jiwoo ate some meat and commented that the place was closer than he thought. Sarang replied that you could already tell from the map and that they would arrive in about 5 minutes. The vehicle the two were using was a popular service in Chrono Life, the Meow Meow carriage. The Molino cat, which inhabited that world, was tamed and trained to pull carriages. Surprisingly, the founder of this service was just a random user with the tamer profession, and the business's success made him more profit than most small business owners. Sarang exclaimed that they had arrived and that the place was really big. Jiwoo thought that their destination, the Rocky Mountain dungeon, reached up to 1,000 meters above sea level and was inhabited by various mid-level 30 monsters, making it a popular hunting ground for newbies. "That's what I heard," he reflected, "since level 7 was as far as I ever got." Anyway, after that long introduction, the reason they were there was to carry Han Sarang. At the time, she had been more serious than he imagined, and somehow he ended up in this situation. He wondered what level he would have to carry her to, thinking it would be better to go straight to the Eurus's nest and max out her level. His thoughts were interrupted when he looked at the girl's hands and remembered something. He said he had prepared a gift for her, and Sarang questioned the sudden gesture. Jiwoo then summoned an item from his inventory, bringing back the transcendental gauntlets. Jiwoo explained that he had forgotten the gauntlets last time, and since he already had a pair, he thought of giving them to her as a gift. Han Sarang blushed at the gesture and suddenly began to cry. She thanked him, saying it had been a long time since she had received a gift. The protagonist questioned if she was serious, since as a famous person, she should receive plenty of gifts. Sarang, however, replied that it wasn't the same thing, and Jiwoo chuckled, agreeing with her. Hugging the gauntlets, Sarang thought to herself that it was truly obvious he wasn't the same as before. She then thanked him once more, promising she would make good use of them. However, she remembered something and asked for his character's name. Jiwoo asked if he hadn't already told her, but she denied it, explaining that although she saw it when they formed the party, she had already forgotten. The protagonist tried to say his name, but the noise from the cart interrupted him. The cat pulling the cart stopped suddenly, and the coachman wondered what had happened. With the sudden stop, everything in the back of the cart was thrown around. The coachman announced that the customers were fine and said the cat had gotten spooked for no reason. In the back of the vehicle, Sarang had fallen on top of Jiwoo. The protagonist asked what that was all about and if Captain Love was okay. The girl confirmed she was, but suddenly, Jiwoo noticed something. She was holding his underwear. Urus watched the scene from afar with a disgusted expression. The cat continued to meow, frightened, and the coachman asked it to calm down, wanting to know what had happened. Standing in front of the cart was Hong, completely injured. She excused herself and asked if they could help her. Everyone turned in her direction, and the protagonists were confused. Hong began to explain that the one responsible was a man she had never heard of. She didn't know his level, and even his class was a mystery. The only thing she found out was his character's name. She was sure of only one thing. He wasn't just any ordinary user. Apparently, he could copy items, as he had manifested an exact copy of her Haho mask right in front of her. His character's name was Passive Boy. Sarang thought that she had never heard that name before. Urus, for some reason, imagined a carrot in place of this character. Jiwoo said he wanted to ask something, and Hong allowed it. The protagonist then asked who she was. Sarang intervened, saying that she was the leader of the Robin Hood Guild, and that even little kids knew her. Urus added, recalling that he was there the day she defeated 3 million players. Jiwoo, however, replied that everyone has their own problems, and that her guild being attacked by some random psycho wasn't a reason for him to help her. Hong then removed her mask, and bowing asked for forgiveness, saying that it was she, personally, who was asking for help. Despite her not even having introduced herself properly, Jiwoo commented that she was persistent, but that he still had no reason to help her. Hong, who was actually a very beautiful girl, introduced herself once more. Suddenly, Jiwoo changed his mind. Who cares about the reason? Helping people in need is my hobby and my specialty. Sarang just thought, what a scumbag. Hong thanked him for agreeing, assuring him that he would definitely not regret this decision. She then revealed that the problem was also related to him, which surprised Jiwoo. Meanwhile, at the Chrono Life building, an employee announced it was time to leave, telling the colleagues from the infrastructure support team that everyone should go home. A man replied, envious, that they still had to work overtime. The team leader questioned this as they didn't have permission. Seo Seung-won intervened, telling them to leave their work and go home, as he would do the overtime alone. A colleague joked, suggesting he still hadn't made up with his wife. After the joke, everyone said their goodbyes and left. Seung-won was left alone in the office and sighed, a smile on his face. Bunch of damn idiots. He grumbled that those bastards only knew how to play dumb, criticizing Gen Z. To him, they took advantage of everything life offered, and because of that, they were ruined, destined to live a poor life forever. Saying this, he put on his virtual reality glasses. Now that they're gone, it's time to make some real money. The device verifies him and connects to Chrono Life. The GM's private line is identified, revealing him to be Passive Boy himself. Once inside the game, the man flies over the mountains. He says the time has come and summons his item, a powerful red sword. This is the Executioner's Blade, level 99, a unique item of incredible power. Seung-won smiles. It's time to work overtime. Everything he has is at the maximum level. The master level, the highest tier, is something that not even professional players can reach, and it is at this level that one can obtain the highest rank items, the Transcendental rank. This information leaked and became a hot topic among players. However, no one had ever seen one of these items. Sarang thinks in shock that she's seeing a real weapon, straight out of a legend, the Transcendental Gauntlets. She's completely frozen by the sight. She calls out to Underpants, saying she just wanted a closer look, but now she wants to put them on. In disbelief, she asks if that is really a Transcendental rank weapon. Jiwoo casually replies that she can use it, as he has several of them. The girl swallows hard. She equips the Transcendental rank weapon, and the gauntlets permanently bind to her, causing a huge explosion in the area. The system notifies her that she has become the owner of the Transcendental Gauntlets, which leaves Sarang quite surprised. The gauntlets begin to glow intensely, but soon shrink down, transforming into a pair of simple gloves. Sarang questions what happened and why the weapon changed into something with such a worn-out appearance. The answer appears: the transcendental gauntlets were sealed due to her lack of qualification. What the hell is this? She thinks. It seems it's not good to use transcendental weapons at a low level. A unique item would have been better. Then she lightly touches a nearby stone. Instantly, the stone shatters along with the entire ground, causing an immense explosion throughout the area. The girl is shocked. What happened? I barely touched it. That only proved that the weapon was, in fact, sealed. Urus comments that it was very weak. So there's nothing special about the transcendental rank, he says, barely containing himself. Jiwoo agrees. Urus then asks, by the way, what do you wish to do now, Hyungnim? Will you accept Hong's request? Jiwoo replies that he has to, since the case was related to him. The scene shifts to the past, to the conversation with Hong. When she made the request, he replied that there was no way, as he didn't even know what this so-called passive boy looked like. Hong questioned him about what he thought the target's objective was. Jiwoo supposed he did it all for fun, but Hong stated that this was obviously a lie. His objective is money. He copies items and sells them for a profit. According to Guild Intelligence, we've heard he's a merchant player. Furthermore, he has been selling several items from Eurus's nest recently. And despite the problem with the decline in value, what he does isn't illegal. However, his actions are an abuse of authority. Jiwoo asks what she meant by that, and Hong continues her explanation. Anyway, this is where you get involved. If we leave Passive Boy alone, the game's economy will collapse, and Chrono Life will fall into ruin. Jiwoo scratches his nose, wondering if she was serious. But what's the problem? Just report him to the customer service center, then his account would get banned. Hong laughs. You're more of an idiot than I thought. Jiwoo bristles. What did you just say? The girl explains that the customer service center won't solve the problem. As soon as they reported it, they would just get an automated response. Hong climbs onto her carriage, saying, you're the only one who can stop him in this game, since you're the one who defeated the World Union Guild all by yourself. Then she jumps from the carriage. I'm counting on you. Before the game gets even more ruined, you must find the passive boy and destroy him. Back in the present, the young man complains that it's a pain, but he has no choice. If he simply ignores the situation, he'll have trouble selling his own items. Sarang asks if he has any ideas, since they can't just look for him without any clues. Jiwoo replies, if we can't report him to the customer service center, there's only one answer. The answer is to blackmail the higher-ups. Urus and Sarang are surprised by the idea. At the Chrono Life building, Jiwoo pulls out his phone and calls the president. He orders the man to go to the Gukbap place, threatening to destroy the server once again if he doesn't show up. On the other end of the line, Deokbae barely manages to question what that bastard means before the protagonist hangs up, bursting into laughter afterward. Furious, Deokbae slams his phone on the table and curses the boy. Jiwoo skips along, ironically asking if customer service doesn't work, since, in that case, he would just go meet the president himself. He decides to make the most of the trip and order 2 bowls of gukbap. However, upon opening the door, he realizes someone is already waiting for him outside. It was Han Sarang. Surprised, Jiwoo asks if she'll be alright, since someone might see her. Sarang replies that she doesn't care, since it's late and no one will notice. Besides, she reminds him that in real life, he should call her by her full name. The girl then sends a message to her Nuna, telling her she was going for a walk. On the other end, the woman, who was in the shower, complains that the damn girl didn't even give her a heads up. At the Gukbap shop, Deokbae angrily throws the door open, shouting and looking for that bastard Lee Jiwoo. He wonders how a brat dares to call him like that, without the slightest bit of respect. He then spots the two of them sitting at a table, eating peacefully. Deokbae approaches and grabs Jiwoo by the neck, calling him an ill-mannered imbecile for daring to order around someone older. His attention, however, is drawn to the girl at the table. He asks who she is and if she's Jiwoo's girlfriend. Before Sarang can answer, Jiwoo cuts him off, asking if he's gone crazy, because that was the nation's biggest idol, Han Sarang. He warns him that if he keeps talking nonsense, he'll be cursed by her fans. Annoyed by the boy's tone, Deokbae tightens his grip on his neck. At that moment, Sarang slams her hand on the table, asking if they can just get straight to the point and stop this nonsense. Jiwoo agrees, and Deokbae, noticing her seriousness, finally lets him go. Jiwoo then orders another bowl of food for the president. Deokbae is surprised to hear the reason for the meeting. Item duplication. He thought it was something truly important, and says they must think the game is a piece of crap. He argues that the government's authorization wasn't for nothing, and that therefore, no hacker is genius enough for such a feat. Jiwoo retorts, saying he's full of shit, because someone saw the item being duplicated. Deokbai insists that the witness must have been mistaken. The two began to argue until Sarang asked to interrupt. She suggested that if an external hacker was impossible, perhaps the problem was an insider. Deokbai was silent for a few seconds. He claimed that was also impossible since not even the internal staff using a GM account would have the ability to duplicate items. Then, he set his spoon aside. He announced he was busy and told them not to forget the bill and to enjoy their meeting. Sarang cheerfully said goodbye to him, while Jiwoo thought that the old man genuinely wanted him dead. Outside the restaurant, Deokbai quickly lit a cigar, sighing as he smoked and reflected for a moment. He called team leader Choi, who promptly accepted the president's order. Deokbai ordered him to prepare 5 men, his most trusted ones. Back at the Stone Mountain dungeon, Jiwoo commented that they were back to square one, and the girl agreed. The protagonist complained that it was irritating, but whether it was the passive boy or not, he would smash the head of whoever it was. Sarang laughed, saying he was acting like a tough guy. She then questioned what the passive boy's true objective was, and Jiwoo asked why the sudden question. Sarang explained that she found it strange. No matter how much she thought about it, if the motive was money, there had to be a specific reason to attack the Robin Hood Guild. Jiwoo said he had no idea. Maybe they just had a lot of expensive items. Sarang replied that was exactly why it was strange. If duplicating items was possible, he could sell anything. She wondered why he went after normal players, and especially against the Robin Hood Guild, which had the best information. Jiwoo was surprised by her line of reasoning. Still, he answered that he had no idea. Sarang said she wasn't surprised, and Jiwoo shot back that she hadn't gotten any smarter. Suddenly, an explosion went off beside them. What was that? What happened? The girl questioned, looking at the immense cloud of smoke. Sarang commented that it seemed to be on the same level as his attacks. Jiwoo ran toward the location, while the girl just screamed her friend's name. At the sight of the explosion, Habaek was on his knees on the ground. He was completely wounded and missing one of his arms. Sungwon burst out laughing, saying he was nothing compared to the rumors. The one and only Habaek. The boss questioned why he was doing this, stating that as the coordinator of this world, he was sure such behavior wouldn't be tolerated. He wouldn't be able to handle the consequences if he were caught by the higher-ups and wouldn't be safe anywhere. Sungwon grabbed him by the neck. He called him an arrogant AI, a mere fragment of data that dared to challenge him. If he took the life of a unique boss like him, there wouldn't be a reset, but a permanent deletion. If he didn't want to go to hell, he'd better answer. He wanted to know where Habaek's master was. Habaek laughed at the threat. He asked if Sungwon really thought he would talk.
Furious at Habaek's attitude, Seungwon raises his sword, telling him to go to hell. However, a voice suddenly commands him to stop. Seungwon realizes someone important is there. It seems she arrived before he did. The goddess of life, Luna. He then tells her to wait a moment, because he's going to finish this guy off and she'll be next.
Luna simply sighs with a faint smile and says it's no use, as after logging into the GM account, he became just like those other overexcited bastards. Enraged, Seungwon insults her, but Luna simply informs him that he's nothing more than a piece of trash. Seungwon halts his sword and then lets out a laugh. He hurls Habaek to the ground, wondering why he should waste his time when she was going to be next anyway. He turns and walks toward Luna, saying he wants to know where Habaek's master is. However, he adds that she doesn't have to answer right away, because they can take their time. After all, once he rips off her arms and legs, he'll hang her from a tree, cauterizing the wounds and keeping her healed so she won't die. That way they can talk all night long since he's working overtime. Luna gives him a cold stare, reminded of the protagonist. She closes her eyes, saying that Seungwon looks just like him, but is in fact his complete opposite. Confused, he asks what the hell she's talking about and tells her to stop spouting nonsense. Suddenly, a gigantic claw descends from the sky, completely crushing Seungwon. Blood splatters across Luna's face as the creature's palm remains motionless over the spot. To her, it just meant he was utterly disgusting. Luna then turns to leave, her immense beauty on display as she walks away. Suddenly, Seungwon's voice echoes. I'd forgotten about this thing. He reappears and pats the monster's leg, concluding that Luna must be the creature's owner. He realizes that's why she was so confident, and admits this is going to be a thorn in his side. Surprised, Luna turns around and asks how he could still be alive. She declares that this time she'll make sure he doesn't return, as trash like him doesn't deserve to live. Seungwon, however, simply says he doesn't care. Seungwon then begins to summon a space. Luna looks around, and suddenly, they are in a separate dimension. The GM zone was a space that could only be created by those with special privileges, and was used for specific purposes, like testing. Seungwon questions if he doesn't deserve to live, saying she's being cringy and needs to stop thinking the game is real life. Luna just gives him an ice-cold stare. Outside the space, Jiwoo and Sarang continue to run toward the scene. The The girl asks if the explosion was caused by the passive boy. Jiwoo confirms, saying he also thinks it's the hacker from the company. The president had said it was impossible, but his expression told a different story. He asks if she hadn't heard that the passive boy single-handedly crushed the Robin Hood Guild, concluding that the bastard must have made a super-powered account and was making his move right now. Sarang called out to her friend, asking if there was any way to run faster, but Jiwoo replied that he hadn't put any points into agility. As they got closer to the GM zone, Sarang asked what it was. Habek, who was already there, said they were the traces of the passive boy's teleport. "It's been a while, Mr. Hero." Jiwoo asked what he was doing there and what had happened to his arm. Sarang just remembered that this was the guy who had kidnapped her. Habek explained that he was attacked by the passive boy and that he had also dragged Luna into the GM zone. Jiwoo wanted to know who Luna was, and Habek said she talked about him a lot, insinuating that Jiwoo had a crush on her, which irritated Sarang. She had straight black hair and a nice body. Jiwoo asked if he meant the little cockroach, since they didn't even know each other. Sarang commented that this was underpants boys type, but Jiwoo told her to get a grip, saying she was the one who kept saying things like that. He added that he wasn't crazy enough to like someone who had insulted his parents and that he wasn't interested in the slightest. The girl was visibly relieved by his answer. Habek questioned, "So what? That doesn't matter." Urus, who was just watching from a distance, thought they were cute. Then Habek coughed up more blood. Jiwoo asked if he was okay, since he looked like he could die at any moment. Habek confirmed that he was not okay at all and asked the hero for a little help. Jiwoo questioned why he should help him, since he could just easily take the drop. Sarang agreed, saying they should split the drop. Habayek asked if they were sure, because if he died, the mirror he had given them would disappear too. Jiwoo immediately touched his shoulder, telling him to relax, as he would heal him no matter what. Sarang asked how he planned to do that, since he hadn't brought any healing potions. Jiwoo just said that it was fine. Then, he began to emanate his power. Jiwoo activated one of the Master Rookie's unique abilities, the Cleric class heal. He then decided to use the skill, but it only recovered HP. Suddenly, Habak's health began to regenerate, 1 point at a time. Habayek asked if that was really a heal, as it felt like he was taking damage. Jiwoo replied that maybe he should have invested a little in intelligence. He then asked what would happen to his arm, since even though the scar would disappear with full health, the damaged body part could only be restored at a tavern. Habayek explained that only happens to players. Monsters like him only get their bodies back after respawning. The protagonist says he'll take Habayek's life with a single blow so he won't feel a thing, but Habayek asks him to wait. He reveals that he's a unique boss, and even if he loses his life, he can't respawn. Jiwoo, shocked, asks what the hell he was talking about, exclaiming that this was a terrible game. Habayek calms him down, saying there are only a few unique bosses like him, and that it doesn't affect the entire game. For his information, Urus is also a unique boss, and the dragon confirms it. That's why he so desperately asked to be saved. Besides the two of them, Luna is also a unique boss. Jiwoo is surprised to hear that, questioning if that cockroach was really a boss. Meanwhile, back in the GM zone, an explosion suddenly erupts. Seungwon charges toward Luna, shouting for her to go to hell. The girl, however, remains standing in her place, challenging him to attack. The blow causes an immense blast of energy. Without hesitation, Seungwon moves in for a second strike, which also explodes with the same intensity. Luna warns him that it's no use. Flying through the sky with an angry expression, she declares that she is the goddess of life and that a mere human like him could never take the life of a god. Seungwon, however, cuts her off, saying he can't hear a thing. Luna becomes visibly irritated by the interruption. Seungwon calls her childish, saying she thinks she sounds cool when she says those things. He explains that he's been with the company for years and already knows her abilities. Furthermore, he saw the fight between her and the protagonist, as the security footage was shared with the team leaders and higher-ups at the company. That whole talk about them not being able to hit her was, in fact, the goddess of life's hidden ability, life creation. It's not that the attacks don't work, but that she recreates herself with the ability the instant she's about to lose her life. Then, he charges forward with his sword once more. The strike creates another blast of energy that hits Luna head-on. Immediately, Luna activates the life creation ability. As she returns to her goddess form, Seungwon comments that, as expected, it was an overpowered ability, and the one that received the most complaints during the company's initial phase. She also created Uricon with this ability, using the fragments of the left head she found in Urus's nest. That's why she had called him her son. So, Seungwon tries to strike her again, but Luna just says he talks too much, splitting him in half with her scepter. She questions the importance of it all, because if he couldn't take her life, knowing everything was useless. Seungwon's body flies through the air. He says that she finally attacked him directly. Suddenly, her scepter transforms into her initial staff, and the girl girl looks at the scene, surprised. Seungwon asks what she thought he had brought into this space. Luna's clothes also begin to change, and she returns to her form from when she was still a player, looking completely shocked. Seungwon questions if she also knew how to make that cute expression, as he thought she was nothing but a bitch. Striking her with his sword, he says that if he takes her life, Habayek's master will definitely appear. So, farewell, unique boss, goddess of life, Luna. In a rather fancy bar, a table was filled with expensive drinks. Seungwon quickly takes a gulp, then slams the glass on the table while saying that drinking after a few hours of overtime was great. His subordinate comments that he worked hard, and that now only the final step remained. Seungwon denies it, because that bastard Habayek didn't call his master. The subordinate argued that at least he had taken Luna's life, and that should have made Habayek's master appear. However, Seungwon revealed he couldn't take her life. His subordinate was shocked, and Seungwon kept his gaze lowered, but said it didn't matter, as there were other ways to meet him. The subordinate admitted there was something he couldn't get off his mind, wanting to know who Habayek's master was. Seungwon asked if he had been working for him without even knowing that. The young man replied that he'd been working for him without asking questions since university. Seungwon set his glass on the table, explaining that, basically, he was one of the main story bosses in Chrono Life. The greatest merchant, the disaster of sloth. The subordinate questioned if that monster was a merchant, and Seungwon confirmed it, saying that kind of freedom was common in Chrono Life. His friend said he'd heard of that before, and that Yurikan was known as gluttony. Seungwon asked if he didn't even know that, as they were the 7 deadly sins from Catholicism, a concept frequently used in movies, manga, and games. Pride, greed, envy, wrath, lust, gluttony, and sloth. These sins are the root of all others, and are called the 7 deadly sins. The subordinate asked if that wasn't plagiarism, and if Chrono Life was just being lazy, but Seungwon retorted that he was the idiot. The concept of the main story bosses was exactly that. Urus of pride, Urakan of gluttony, Riot of sloth, and Luna of lust. The employee grew agitated, saying that Damned Woman was also a main boss. He argued that if a character like that were just some random player, the game's balance would be completely destroyed. However, his boss explained that while she was a boss, it didn't mean she was an NPC. The confused employee asked if a player had class changed into a boss. Seungwon slammed his glass on the table. The freedom in Chrono Life is greater than you think, he stated. Just as a boss can become a merchant, a player can become a main boss. Jiwoo complained that this was all too complicated, and wanted to know who that cockroach was anyway. He asked if she was some kind of mix between a player and an NPC. Habayek admitted he wasn't sure, as it was something he was unfamiliar with, but suggested the passive guy would know, since he's a GM. The protagonist grumbled that he now had one more reason to beat the guy up. Sarang interrupted, saying there was still something she didn't understand. She questioned why the passive boy wanted to meet the disaster of sloth. If his goal was to make money, he could have just put the item up for auction. She noted that ever since the Robin Hood Guild's attack, his actions hadn't made any sense. Habayek said that personally, he had an idea of the reason behind it all. It was because of the peace of God, or rather mythic rank items. Jiwoo commented that he'd heard that term before. Urus then explained that it was what Habayek had said when he kidnapped Captain Love, and that it was just another name for mythic rank items. Suddenly, Hong approached them. "Are you guys talking about the mythic rank items too?" she asked. She apologized for disappearing, explaining that she'd been busy with her own investigation. Hong then proposed they form a group for a while, as she had found the passive boy's hideout. The group followed Hong into the middle of the mountains, arriving at a small, isolated cabin. Sarang questioned if that was really the hideout, finding it much simpler than she had imagined. Hong confirmed it was the place and used her judgment skill on the location, proving it was true. Jiwoo asked if the owner was there now, but Hong denied it, saying there were no signs of him. "It's a shame, I'd like to see what's inside," someone said, but before they could finish, an explosion erupted. Jiwoo had smashed part of the cabin with a single blow from his stick. Hong, astonished, asked how he managed to break the wall. Jiwoo replied simply, "I just hit it, and it broke." Without further delay, they decided to go inside. Inside, Sarang's jaw dropped at the sight. Tons of gold piled up alongside rare artifacts. She asked if all of those were copied items, but Hong denied it. None of these items are copies. They're all mythic rank. Hong estimated the total value there to be around 5 billion, leaving everyone completely stunned. Hong continued, saying she had also seen several of the items he took during the attack, and that he probably left them there because he ran out of inventory space. As expected, his goal was the mythic items. Jiwoo asked why, and if he did it for the price, since he could have just gone to Eurus's nest like he did. Hong replied that way, he would only get a small amount of money and the company would notice, just as it happened with her. Mythic items are different, as there is a buyer who can infinitely purchase all of them. Jiwoo thought. In that case, the buyer was... Hong interrupted him, revealing it was Habayek's master, the biggest market, Riot. Habayek agreed, as he had been thinking the same thing. Hong said the passive boy was worse than she thought, but regardless, it was a good plan. Since Riot isn't a user, there's no risk of the information leaking, and he will sell the items without affecting the game's economy. If they took a screenshot of this and reported it to customer service, they would take appropriate action, since the GM had gathered the items in his personal space. Then, she removed her mask, thanking them for their good work, as they would solve the case with this thanks to them. Jiwoo questioned her, asking by whose permission she would do that. He asked if she was filming some kind of drama, considering she'd been monologuing all day with the grand finale being a report to customer service. Hong confirmed and asked if there was another course of action. Jiwoo scoffed at the idea, questioning what else there was to do, since they were going to teach the passive boy a good lesson. In the city, he appeared wearing Hong's mask, while Seung-won, completely infuriated by the whole situation, glared at the protagonist from within the crowd. Sarang wondered if that was the passive boy, as he had appeared exactly as Underpants Guy said, right in the center of the village. Seung-won asked what was with the mask, and if he was trying to disguise himself, calling him the stick bastard. Jiwoo just burst out laughing, saying he had borrowed it from Hong, and that the mask was so famous anyone would recognize him. An assassin on the roof asked if that wasn't the passive boy, and Hong confirmed, since he had appeared as planned. The guild member asked what he was planning, doing this in the middle of the village. In the cabin, Jiwoo said that first, they would take all of his items. Hong questioned why, and the protagonist replied that it was a pain to explain, so she should just listen, as he had already thought it through. Furthermore, she should lend him a mask, preferably hers. Sarang kicked him in the back. Later, outside the cabin, Seung-won approached. He grew angry seeing the broken wall. He rushed forward, shouting that it was impossible, since a personal hideout couldn't be destroyed. He yelled, searching for his mythic items and his money, but there was nothing. The young man realized he was screwed, getting even angrier when he saw the note on the floor. On it, Jiwoo had written that if he wanted his items back, he just had to go to the village at 7 p.m. Back in the present, Seung-won approached, demanding to know how he dared to take his money, but Jiwoo warned him not to get any closer. He then drew the draconic fire dagger and warned, "If you take one more step, I'll sell it to the NPC shop." Seung-won retorted that the item was worth 200 million in real money and that if he sold it, he wouldn't even get 300 gold. Gritting his teeth, he yelled, "You bastard, what the hell do you want?" Jiwoo replied that he wanted absolutely nothing, but if he had to choose something, it would be for Seung-won to figure it out for himself. Watching the scene, Sarang thought that Underpants Guy really looked like a villain. Jiwoo then taunted, "Does that piece of shit have a problem? What are you going to do now?" Seeing him tremble was very funny, but suddenly, Seung-won vanished and reappeared right behind the protagonist. He then used his teleport to the GM zone, taking Jiwoo with him. In the city, a cloud of smoke prevented everyone from seeing what had happened. Sarang called out for Underpants Guy, but realized he had vanished too. Inside the GM zone, a massive explosion occurred. Jiwoo and Seung-won clashed their weapons with tremendous force. The GM yelled, "How dare a filthy pig like you mess with an administrator? I'll chop your body into cubes to make kakdoogie." Jiwoo was struck by a direct hit, causing a massive explosion behind him. He dug his stick into the ground to stop his momentum, getting dragged a long way. With the impact, Hong's mask split in half and fell to the ground in pieces, revealing a large wound on Jiwoo's face. He then comments, "You're even bigger trash than I thought, calling a player from your own company a pig." His body, however, regenerates quickly thanks to the healing factor. Seung-won questions who cares about that. "Pigs like you have gone crazy and forgotten reality. You get so immersed you go insane over pieces of game data. There's no reason to treat scummy users like you as if you were human." He clashes his sword once more with Jiwoo's stick, and another catastrophic explosion occurs, destroying everything around them. "You're so cringe," Jiwoo says. "You're blaming the players for no reason. You're probably having a midlife crisis." This only infuriates Seung-won further, and he vanishes from Jiwoo's sight. Jiwoo thinks the blow will come from above, but the attack actually comes from behind. He thinks anxiously, "I can't see him." Jiwoo is hit by slashes from every possible direction. Seung-won shouts at him not to underestimate him, saying that all players are the same. No matter how hard the developers work, all they get in return are insults and criticism. He remembers that time 7 years ago at the Chrono Life headquarters. There he was, a developer who had not yet lost his innocence. Jiwoo interrupts him, striking his face with the stick and telling him to stop. He says he couldn't care less about that tragic villain backstory and yells at Seung-won to cut the crap already. The attack causes an explosion larger than any seen before. When the smoke begins to dissipate, Seung-won's healing factor skill is activated. He recovers instantly and lands a slash on Jiwoo's chest. Jiwoo wonders how he has healing factor, but soon concludes that for a GM account it makes sense. Suddenly, Seungwon activates the hidden skill of the strength stat, called Spirit of a Titan. The skill emanates an immense bluish energy, and Jiwoo wonders if this is a hidden skill, just like the healing factor he himself obtained. Seungwon begins to get up. The skill's description says that Spirit of a Titan offers the strength of a giant, and its requirements are similar to those of healing factor. Seungwon grinds his teeth, screaming in rage, and the Titan spirit behind him mimics his movements. The bluish energy begins to flood his body. Jiwoo wondered what was with all the fancy effects. Not even his own healing factor was this dramatic. Finally, the skill is fully activated. During its activation, the damage and range of his attacks are increased by 1,000%. Seungwon raises his sword and unleashes a sideways slash in Jiwoo's direction. The hunter perceives the magnitude of the attack, but is struck head-on by the immense wave of destruction that sweeps away everything in its path. His healing factor activates immediately. As his body regenerates, Jiwoo grips his staff, observing how everything around him has been utterly destroyed. He remarks that the skill is practically a cheat, and that Seungwon should just hand it over. Seungwon barely has time to question it when he is pierced in the stomach by a tentacle. Jiwoo used the hidden skill of gluttony, saying he can steal his stats and learn the skill. However, Seungwon manages to avoid the blow at the last second, activating the hidden skill of the agility stat, called Light Speed Dash. Immediately, dozens of slashes hit Jiwoo from all directions. Seungwon wonders how that was possible. His Light Speed Dash allows him to move at that speed in any direction, so he charges forward once more. He declares that the outcome of a battle is determined by stats and calculations, and his are all at level 99,999. With that, he lands a powerful punch in Jiwoo's stomach, sending him flying far into the distance. Seungwon lands on the ground, wondering if Jiwoo didn't realize it. No matter how good his control was, he could never win with such a massive stat difference. In fact, he thought his opponent's gameplay was garbage, since he was just a loser who relied on maxed out items. Kneeling with his staff in hand, Jiwoo grits his teeth in rage. Hearing that, especially coming from him, infuriated him, as Seongwon was nothing more than a cheater abusing a GM account. Seongwon asks who cares about that. If Jiwoo didn't like it, he should have applied to be a GM too. He accuses him of being jealous of how passionately he plays. All it took was a few tweaks to the data to become the strongest character, until a headbutt smashes right into him. Jiwoo had flown at him, striking him with extreme speed. Seongwon is sent flying, his nose bleeding and a look of utter shock on his face. "What the hell was that?" he demands. "How did you move so fast with such low agility?" Jiwoo replies, "What else could it be other than pure gameplay?" Seongwon gets up, calling him an arrogant bastard. He then uses his light speed dash against him again, yelling for him to try that again, because whatever skill he used, it could never match his speed. Jiwoo, however, simply ducks and says he didn't use a skill, but the game's system itself. He executes a swing in midair and suddenly pivots in the opposite direction, leaving Seongwon confused. Jiwoo explains that it was the rebound control option. By striking in the opposite direction, he used the recoil as momentum, flying straight towards Seongwon. The administrator is shocked by the maneuver. Jiwoo smashes the staff right into the man's forehead. He's pretty fast, Seongwon thinks. Jiwoo, on the other hand, just pretends the hit was a lucky shot. The administrator is thrown to the ground, causing a large cloud of smoke. Jiwoo taunts him, asking how that felt and if it was so amazing. He explains that he simply turned off the rebound control option in the game settings and wants to know how it feels to take a planet-shattering rebound attack. Seongwon gets angry, calling him a bastard who relies on garbage mechanics and telling him he has no reason to be so excited. He claims it won't happen again, as it was nothing more than a lucky shot. Jiwoo agrees, admitting that he is, in fact, still much slower than the light speed dash. "Let's just cut to the chase and finish this." Seongwon just laughs. He calls him a filthy little player, stating that Jiwoo doesn't understand the situation because of that one lucky hit. After all, a mere user like him could never defeat him. Jiwoo, however, replies that there is a way. He points his hand forward, and a purple light emanates from his powers. Jiwoo says goodbye to the passive boy, commenting that although it was quick, it was quite fun. Outside the game, Sarang is curious. She wants to know what Underwear Boy is going to do, because even if he's strong, he couldn't beat a GM. Hong replies that she doesn't know the details either, and that apparently, not even his girlfriend knew anything. Sarang is happy to be called that, and says the only thing Jiwoo told her was about the plan to provoke the passive boy to lure him into the GM zone. Hong then reveals that something is bothering her, the reason he left a note and postponed the plan by a day. Somehow, she believes it's related to the method he'll use to win. Back in the game, Jiwoo's hand continues to emanate an immense purple glow. Seongwon starts to think that his opponent's confident expression might mean he actually has a plan to defeat him. The protagonist then activates activates the skill, Character Summon. It was the most basic summoning skill. Seong-won is surprised, repeats the skill's name, and then bursts out laughing. He was expecting some incredible skill, but it was just a simple summon. He scoffs, asking if Jiwoo thinks he's some kind of jack-of-all-trades, because even with that skill, it would be useless with low charisma and intelligence stats. Those are basic stats, and with such a low level, he could only summon some weak monster. He calls him a filthy pig, but suddenly his voice trails off. A portal opens and a man steps out. He takes out a cigar and adjusts his sunglasses. It was Deokbae. Upon seeing him, Seong-won is completely shocked. Jiwoo smiles. Seong-won's reaction was priceless and made the whole summoning effort worthwhile. The night before, an employee asked his sunbae if he wasn't staying for another round, but the man declined, saying he had to work overtime. The colleague commented that he really loved his job and respected him for it, then turned to his companion to suggest they grab a few more drinks. On his way, however, the sunbae came face to face with a group of men in suits. They were accompanying President Deokbae. Later, in a dark alley, the employee was seen begging for forgiveness. He swore he planned to leave the country as soon as he got the money and that he was just following orders. One of his team leaders asked what they should do, and Deokbae ordered them to get rid of him. Walking over to Jiwoo, he thanked the young man, saying that thanks to him, they caught the traitor before he became a bigger problem. Jiwoo agreed, wondering if this was a game company or the actual mafia. Deokbae said he'd been planning to take Jiwoo's life if he had called unnecessarily one more time, and the protagonist simply accepted it. The president then claimed he was just kidding and said he would deal with the passive boy right away, as they planned to call the legal department to sue him in every way possible, and, of course, fire him as well. Jiwoo asked if the president had anything planned for tomorrow at 7 p.m., and Deokbae said no. At that, the protagonist broke into a wide grin, telling him that he should also participate in the proper lesson that was about to take place. Back in the present, Seong-won's legs trembled at the sight of the president, and he screamed in fear. He begged the system to log him out, but permission was denied since he was in battle. Then, he declared he knew what to do, and commanded the GM zone to close. Jiwoo pointed out that the guy was trying to run away. The president, in turn, commanded the presidential zone to open. The entire area took on a green hue, and Seong-won grew even more terrified, crying out that it was all over. He held his sword, trembling with fear, but muttered that it didn't matter, as he would just quit the company after this anyway. Charging forward at an absurd speed, he attacked, thinking that it didn't matter if it was the president, he could just go to hell. However, his strike completely missed its target, slicing off only the tip of the president's cigar. Seong-won trembled in fear at the result, and even Jiwoo was completely stunned. The president took another drag from his cigar, saying that even rabid dogs hesitate before biting their own masters, and that Seong-won was worse than a mad dog. President Choi Deokbae had infinite stats, and his level was infinite as well. Then, he readied his fist, announcing, "You're fired." There was nothing Seong-won could do but accept reality, and he closed his eyes. The fist closed in and crushed his face in an instant. An explosion far worse than any of Jiwoo's attacks erupted from his back. That single punch annihilated the passive boy. Jiwoo thought in disbelief that the damage had surpassed even the 99,999 healing factor, and that the old man was terrifying. And just like that, the problem was over. All the epic items the passive boy had taken were returned to their original owners, and in the end, it was discovered that several guilds had been affected. Jiwoo found out later that the passive boy, Seong-won, was fired that same day. Even in real life, he was beaten to a pulp by the old man president, and then kicked out. Afterward, he tried to sue the chairman for assault, but that only ended up making his life even more difficult. As a countermeasure, the old chairman went all in on the legal battle, and was ultimately cleared of all criminal charges. Seong-won will spend the rest of his life paying the company back for material damages and lost profits. Additionally, rumors spread that he had been permanently banned from the industry. That was the happy ending to that story. In the game's starting village, after that day, his life as a seller was back in full swing. Approaching his friends, he saw Hong wearing her mask and Sarang with a big smile on her face. Everything had returned to normal. Logging out of the game Chrono Life, he found himself back on his couch sighing as he sat down. Jiwoo thought that if there was one thing still bothering him, it was the fact that he hadn't been able to ask the passive boy something. He wanted to know how that cockroach could be both a player and an NPC at the same time, and why no one knew who she was. But as he got up, he noticed a girl on his couch. Jiwoo was completely taken aback, his expression changing in an instant. Luna seemed excited that he was awake and said, "It's been a while since I've seen Mr. Loser." The protagonist prepared some ramen ramen for her. This looks so good. It must be delicious, said Luna. Of course it is, Jiwoo replied. The girl started to eat, and he watched her suspiciously, wondering what the hell was going on in his house. At least, there was the answer to his question. She wasn't an NPC. She had always been a player. Luna noticed he was staring at her, and Jiwoo blushed. She also blushed quite a bit. Why are you staring at me? She questioned, and Jiwoo tried to play it off. Is it because I'm so beautiful? The protagonist got annoyed. Stop being silly and just eat your ramen. Then, the girl went back to eating calmly. Jiwoo did the same, his face still flushed. He thought she was really beautiful, but then he remembered her asking why she would form a hunting party with him, since he was a loser. On top of that, she had called his parents beggars. Jiwoo thought he had almost gotten carried away again, like a true loser. So he faced her and asked who the hell she was. Also, how did she know where he lived and the passcode to his house? Luna finishes her ramen and stands up, stretching. She says she should reward him for making the food, and since she's sure he's curious about many things, he can ask whatever he wants, as she'll answer everything. Jiwoo stares at her suspiciously, but says that's fine, and that he'll start with a lighter topic. He asks if that is her natural hair color, because when they first met, it was light pink. Luna looks at him, blushing, and says he had already asked that in the past, adding that she's happy he noticed, remembering their first battle. She confirms that it is her natural color. Jiwoo asks what the hell she is talking about, and the girl tries to play it off, asking if he prefers pink hair and if she should dye it, but he changes the subject. He wants to know if her character was deleted for being defeated by the passive boy. Luna explains that she did indeed lose her life, but her character wasn't deleted, as the confrontation happened while she was in a human state. Jiwoo asks for more details, and the girl explains that she didn't know her divine authority would disappear when attacked in an administrator's zone. That was a huge relief, because if that weren't the case, she would have had to create another character from scratch. Jiwoo then asks if she plans to do that again, since she needs to take the lives of 1,000 people to become the goddess of life. Luna denies it, explaining that killing 1,000 players was just one of the conditions. Besides, she needs to complete an even more difficult requirement to change her class. She can freely switch between human and goddess modes, and asks if he has any more questions on the matter. Jiwoo says he appreciates her kindness in answering, but points out that she still hasn't answered the first and most important question. He asks once more, who is she? He points out that she keeps showing up no matter where he goes in the game, but following him in real life is crazy. He warns her not to dare avoid the question again, and threatens to report her to the police if she doesn't answer directly. Luna looks into his eyes and then closes them, saying that in that world, there are too many people getting in the way. Then she stands up, stating that the reason she came here was to make an offer. She asks if Mr. Loser wants to become her man. Jiwoo is completely shocked by the proposal until he realizes what she really meant. An awkward silence falls between them. Suddenly, the apartment's doorbell rings repeatedly. Jiwoo wonders who it could be at this hour. He went to the door and answered it. On the other side, Sarang asked if Boxer Boy was in, saying she was a friend of his. She insisted that she needed to talk about something important and asked him to open the door, but he just looked back in the direction where Luna was. He hesitated, thinking of Luna, who was in his room. A few minutes later, he finally opened the door. Han Sarang complained that he should have opened it sooner, instead of leaving her waiting outside. So this is Boxer Boy's house, she thought, noticing the place was much cleaner than she had imagined, and that its layout was quite similar to her own. Suddenly looking to the side, she asked if he was having a late-night snack, since it looked like he enjoyed spicy food. Jiwoo confirmed. He asked why she was visiting him at this time of night. Sarang replied that it was about the game and asked what time he would log in the next day. Jiwoo explained that he didn't know, as he'd have to see if he had anything to do after waking up and having breakfast. From the room, Luna listened to the conversation unfold, closing her eyes with jealousy. Sarang said she would see him tomorrow and that if he overslept, she would kill him. But before she left, she needed something. She asked for his phone to put her number in, since she couldn't just come over every time she wanted to talk to him. Jiwoo questioned if it was okay for a celebrity to give out her number like that, and Sarang asked why he was acting that way. After saving the contact as Han Sarang, she asked him to give her a call so she could save his number too. Before leaving, she warned him that if he didn't answer her messages, she would send him on a one-way trip to hell. The apartment door finally closed. Jiwoo wondered what had just happened. Outside, with the door closed, Sarang sighed in relief. After all, she had managed to get his number in a very natural way. She'd better hurry and send him a message soon. Back in the apartment, Jiwoo commented that he was going to have a heart attack with everything happening in the middle of the night. Luna questioned why he had asked her to hide, since they weren't doing anything strange. He replied that her just being there was strange enough. He said he was tired and wanted her to leave. Luna stated she would only leave after spending the night there, making Jiwoo think he was going to lose his mind. The girl then said she was just kidding and would leave as soon as he gave her an answer to her offer. What the hell kind of offer is that? He questioned. And why do you keep spouting nonsense? "Who are you, anyway?" Luna replied that his question was too ambiguous, but to put it simply, she wanted him to please join a party with her inside the game. The next day, inside a grand hall, Habayak called for his master. He presented himself before him, even without an arm, addressing him as Lord Disaster of Sloth. The great merchant Riot, seated on his throne, stared at his subordinate's wound, wanting to know what had happened to his arm. Habayak begged for forgiveness, explaining that his own lack of skill had led to his body being damaged. Riot grew furious at this and extended his hand toward his subordinate, healing him instantly. A new arm grew from his body. Habayak, surprised, said that his wound had recovered once again. Riot ordered him to say who had injured him, asking if it was the hero he had mentioned before. Habayak denied it, saying it was the contrary. The hero had actually saved his life. He claimed that if the master saw him, he would surely approve, as he was the best current candidate for the 7 deadly sins. On a beach within Chrono Life, a hunting ground for players level 30 and above, slimes were common liquid monsters. However, the area's boss was not something any novice could face. It was the level 85 Kraken. It possessed skin so tough that not even a sharp blade could easily pierce it, and legs that moved freely on both land and sea. The product of an unbalanced game design, with an extremely ferocious personality, a field boss notorious for traumatizing new players. But at that moment, it was struck in the mouth by Jiwoo, who used a skill that attacked without depleting the final hit point. The monster's HP bar stopped at exactly 1 point, and the Kraken collapsed to the ground. Jiwoo shouted for Captain Love to act. The girl immediately leaped from the ground, flying as high as she could. After a quick mid-air acrobatic, she unleashed her fallen dragon stomp on the monster, crushing it and driving it into the ground. Jiwoo was impressed, noting the final blow was perfect, and asked if she gained much experience. However, the girl shook her head, saying she received very little. Urus explained it was due to the large level difference between them, which prevented her from gaining experience. By the way, Jiwoo asked if her skill had gotten stronger, since it didn't seem as powerful the last time she used it. Sarang replied that it must be because of the weapon. Jiwoo remembered the gauntlets and said that with them, Sarang could now hunt without his help. But the girl reminded him that would mean staying away from her briefs boy, and asked what he was talking about since being carried by him was much better. They continued their conversation as Luna watched from the sky, gracing them all with her beauty. She recalled Jiwoo's words from the day before when she had asked him a question. Jiwoo had refused, saying he didn't want to. He explained that he would never play with her, as he hated being backstabbed like the first time they met. Besides, he was already in a group with Sarang and would be beaten up if he let her join. Watching the scene, Luna saw the girl pull Jiwoo aside and commented jealously that it made her want to ruin the girl's life. However, she turned away, deciding to let it go for the time being. After all, Jiwoo would have to be her man anyway, and she would take that woman's life for the sake of Chrono Life's ending. Urus then advised that he couldn't carry her in the game. He complained that this problem came up all the time, but it was impossible due to the vast level difference. Jiwoo asked more about it, and the conversation caught Sarang's attention. Jiwoo wondered what to do and if there was another way. Sarang interrupted him, saying she'd been watching him talk to himself for a while, and asked if someone else was with him. Surprised, Jiwoo asked if she couldn't see the little dragon, but Sarang had no idea what he was talking about. Urus reminded his young Neem that other people couldn't see his presence. Jiwoo remembered that was true. The dragon then explained that there was a way. His master would just need to share a bit of mana to summon him into reality. Jiwoo argued that his intelligence and wisdom were too low, and his mana was nearly 0, but Urus assured him it would be enough. With that, Jiwoo emanated a vast purple energy. The soul of Urus began to materialize on the spot, and Sarang noticed the light gathering at a single point. Urus emerged in his adorable dragon form, letting out an equally cute sound. Upon seeing him, Sarang got a nosebleed and exclaimed how cute he was, asking to touch him. Urus was irritated by her audacity, asking how a mere human dared to touch him and if she wasn't afraid of going to hell. Jiwoo, however, said it was fine, and the girl immediately hugged the small dragon. Suddenly, a voice rang out saying he had finally found them. Jiwoo turned to find Habayak and his griffin, questioning what he was doing there. Habayak explained that the situation had become complicated, and he had to flee in a hurry to meet the hero. Jiwoo asked how he knew his location. Habayak revealed that he had used one of the mirror's abilities, the 7th vision of exploration, which guided him to an opponent he had previously faced. He warned that there was no time for explanations, as a terrible person was heading to their exact location. Jiwoo interrupted him, noticing his healed arm. Habayak confirmed that his master had fixed it, but that they were facing a gigantic problem. Just then, an immense pressure made the entire place tremble. Jiwoo wondered if it was an earthquake. Sarang felt the power too, as did Urus, who had been enjoying the affection. With a fearful expression, Habayak announced that he had arrived. It was his eternal master, the owner of the great throne, accompanied by an army of angels. This was Riot, the disaster of sloth. Sarang wondered what all that was, asking if it was a soldier in angelic armor. Ji-woo, on the other hand, only remembered what he had been told about the disaster. He had thought that being called the Great Merchant, Riot would be a human-like monster like Habayak, and couldn't understand why he was so enormous. Habayak flew on his griffin toward his master. "I am sorry. I was unable to explain the situation in detail." Riot replied that it was fine, as he would come down himself to explain everything. Though fearful, Habayak simply closed his eyes and said he understood. The throne began to descend at an immense speed, crashing into the sandy beach. The impact sent Ji-woo and Sarang flying. Riot then said it was a pleasure to meet him, as he had heard much about him from Habayak, and that he was the current hero. Ji-woo grew apprehensive, wondering if this man was truly the disaster of sloth. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, Luna walked calmly to the entrance of a ruin. She seemed to already have a plan in mind. "I've finally found it," she said. So, he was here, sitting on the throne. Before her was the human considered the strongest in life and the first hero, Lord Yopi. Luna murmured that the description was exactly as the game had described. A legendary, obsolete, and familiar hero. Suddenly, the mark on Yopi's forehead began to glow, revealing some kind of power. "I was expecting this," Luna said, pointing her scepter at him. "I don't know whose idea it was, but this game's story is truly childish and cliché, but that's part of its charm." Her scepter began to glow, aimed at the great hero. Back on the island, Ji-woo watched Riot, lost in thought. He was Sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins, who commanded the strongest tribe of angels and was also known as the Great Merchant in Chrono Life. His presence was fitting for that enormous throne, several meters high and made of pure gold. However, despite all that majesty, his appearance was that of a child, which left Ji-woo and Sarang surprised. Urus commented that the brat still had the same charisma, even after all this time. Using his powers, Riot floated down from his throne and flew toward the protagonist. "This body is Riot, Sloth. And you are the hero Habayak mentioned, right?" Ji-woo replied that he probably was, feeling strangely unsettled by the child's presence. Riot let out a scornful sigh, commenting that the level of humans these days had dropped considerably if a guy like him was considered a hero. Ji-woo asked what he meant, but was suddenly struck by an explosive kick to his face. Sarang was surprised by his speed. Riot spun around with another kick, hitting the other side of the protagonist's face with extreme ease, sending him flying into a rock and causing considerable damage. Habayak called out to him, "Lord Riot, why are you attacking the hero? He's the one who helped us." Riot, however, told him to shut up. "If I wanted to talk, I wouldn't have come all this way. After all, our kind will always be opposed to humans. I can't believe you approached them so needlessly. Do you have any idea how foolish your actions were?" Emerging from the rubble, Ji-woo admitted that he was right about that. The little boy really seems to understand that a player and a monster can never be friends, so just stay right there. "Since you made the first move, there shouldn't be a problem, right?" Riot just glared at him angrily. "Don't be mistaken, human. You were the one who made the first move." Ji-woo, confused, asked when he had attacked him. In response, Riot slammed his leg on the ground, causing a massive explosion around him. Urus, pride of the 7 deadly sins, was the one who lost his life and accelerated the entire game. Saying this, he hurled an enormous rock toward the protagonist. "And why are you only complaining about that now?" Ji-woo questioned, batting the rock away with a swing of his staff and causing another huge explosion. "Urus is, officially, the strongest boss in Chrono Life," Riot shouted, as he landed a powerful kick to the protagonist's stomach. "He was supposed to appear in the final raid of the main story. However, you took his life and messed up the entire order. Urakan of Gluttony wasn't supposed to be consumed like that either. They are beings who were only meant to be defeated 10 years from now." Sarang tried to intervene, saying that Urakan had attacked first and that the protagonist had saved her, but Riot just yelled for her to shut up. The girl recoiled, fearful. The deadly sin continued. "How dare you interrupt me? I did not give you permission to speak." A crushing pressure forced her to the ground. She wondered what kind of power this was inside a game, as she hadn't felt anything like it, not even when facing Urakan. From a distance, Urus watched everything unfold, until he noticed something different. The two stared at each other from a distance. Riot says that Urakan was born from Urus's defeat, and ultimately, she was the one responsible for it all. And the problem, which has been growing ever since, is about to erupt. the strongest human in Chrono Life, the first hero, Yopi, will be resurrected very soon. Yopi's skeleton opens its eyes, emanating a great aura the same color as Luna's. A smile spreads across the girl's face as she says she knows it's not yet his time to awaken. That's why she came to share her powers with him. The hands, once skeletal, begin to grow fingers and flesh, regenerating completely beneath a gauntlet. Yopi rises from his throne, emanating an overwhelming amount of energy. Jiwoo asks what would happen if he were resurrected. After all, if he's a hero, he should be on humanity's side. There shouldn't be any problem with him coming back from the dead. Riot just sighs, annoyed. She says he's dumber than she thought and that he should already know this. He won't be resurrected as a human, but as one of the 7 deadly sins. Annihilation will be his sole purpose, along with vengeance against the humans who so vilely betrayed him. The temple floor begins to tremble, and a skeletal hand emerges from the earth. A skeleton rises from the ground, the first of an army that begins to march out of the temple. The energy coming from Yopi can be seen from anywhere in Chrono Life. Then, Luna explains that the one who once trusted and loved humans now hates them after his death. It was truly a childish story, and the sin he will receive. A gigantic skeletal dragon joins the army. Yopi declares that he was the first hero, and now he was also the Sin of Wrath. A continent that has existed since ancient times, Chrono, a place where there were no wars or disputes, a blessed place full of peace. However, one day, demons appeared. They began to take the lives of humans, sowing chaos throughout the land. In an instant, the continent called Chrono turned into a hell. At that time, a light appeared amidst the despair, and was later called the first hero, Yopi. But Jiwoo just skips the scene. Riot asks what he did, and the protagonist explains that he pressed the skip button, as he's not the type to read the game's story. In other words, she was just saying that the dark hero would be resurrected. Jiwoo had heard what he needed to. He'd taken a beating, and she only came all this way to talk about that? Then he asks her, "Did you know I defeated that Eurus you admire so much with a single blow? Strongest human or first hero, it makes no difference. I have no reason to be afraid of you." Riot replies that he's even dumber than she thought. Riot couldn't believe that Jiwoo didn't know fear, being a human himself. After all, they would all be overrun by the first hero and his army. With that, she turns to leave. Jiwoo asks her where she's going, wondering if she didn't come to fight. Riot replies that it's no fun. She was just curious about the current hero's situation, but concluded he was nothing special. She says she once walked alongside the hero Yopi, and that he is the only human she acknowledges as worthy. Jiwoo cannot, and never will, defeat him. The protagonist sighs, thanking him for giving him even more of an urge to beat him to a pulp. However, Riot was mistaken if he thought he would be allowed to just walk away after attacking him. Habaek intervenes, asking the hero to calm down. Jiwoo tells him to let go, unless he wants to go to hell along with his master. Habaek, however, insists that the hero should calm down, since there's no need for a fight now that their talk is over. The protagonist retorts that he wants to fight, as his jaw still hurts from the punch he took. Habaek urges them to calm down, mentioning the money Jiwoo had been making selling items. Surprised, Jiwoo asks how he knows that. The King of Mirrors explains that his master told him. The one who spent 15 billion gold on the items was Riot. Meanwhile, in Yopi's army, he stands at the center, next to Luna. Yopi says he understands the situation. After all, many years have passed since he lost his life. Luna confirms, explaining that he was supposed to be resurrected many years in the future, but history was already a mess. So, she provided the energy he needed and told him not to worry about anything. Yopi thanks her, promising to repay her later if he gets the chance. Luna asks where he is going. The first hero says the question is obvious, calling her lust, one of the 7 deadly sins. His dragon's wings spread open, unleashing a deafening roar. The dragon begins to fly, heading towards the mountains, and then prepares a blast of fire. Below, the skeletons scatter in desperation. Yopi declares that he himself will destroy the world he once protected. Then, he uses his teleportation magic and disappears. Luna is left behind, watching the smoke dissipate. She sighs deeply. All right, she thinks. My work here is done. But she wonders if it was really all right, and if she regretted it all. In Urakan's case, she did what she wanted. This, however, was very different. She only did it because he seemed like a loose end in the main story. A divine voice replies that it's all right, and that they should just enjoy it. Looking at the earth from afar, for they must see the way this world will be cleansed.